Mongoose whisper through the trees, cold winds carrying their pleas. Lives ended, stories untold, a heart of stone, a grip gone cold. They said it was him, they swore it was clear, blonde hair like smoke, the devil near. They said it was him, they swore it was clear, blonde hair like smoke, the devil near, a heart of stone, a grip gone cold. Mongoose whisper through the trees, cold winds carrying their pleas. Lives ended, stories untold. They said it was him, they swore it was clear, blonde hair like smoke, the devil near. They said it was him, they swore it was clear, blonde hair like smoke, the devil near.
Hello, welcome. Fancy meeting you here. G'day. Look, there we have our microphone. I apologise for the delay. Welcome to the Defence Rests. StreamYard have decided that they're changing up the format and allowing you to stream in landscape and portrait, and the setting up of that was more than I actually thought it was going to be. So that's why it was a technical error on my behalf, as per usual. So I apologise and welcome. So today, Martin Bryant, back to the Port Arthur Massacre, which occurred in April 1996. And Martin Bryant was, or has been, convicted of the 35 unalivings at the massacre. It's still today Australia's biggest mass murder. And in researching this particular case, it's extremely evident that there were corners cut and information relayed had been somewhat adapted. Let's just put it that way. So tonight I started to watch a presentation that another content creator had done, and no shaming here or anything like that. It's purely just an example to show how the mainstream media information continues to be perpetually portrayed in their narrative. Because if you look at the surface of it and you just do a quick bit of research on it, you don't actually see the discrepancies and the differences and the narrative, basically. So what I've done is I'm going to use this video to watch, and we're going to watch it together. And wherever it comes up in the content where there is discrepancies or where there is something that I can show you that is untrue, we'll be stopping it there, and we'll be showing you exactly why, how, when, where, and hopefully that way you can see for yourself. I have attached the link to the particular video in the description box with the timestamps of all of the discrepancies, so to speak, if you want to follow along. But we'll be going with them one by one. Now, for those of you who haven't heard of Martin Bryant, he was 28 at the time, and this occurred back in April of 1996, as I said. And there is two videos. As I said, this is a bit of an insert into the 10-part series that we're actually presenting. So there are 2 episodes of that out at the moment, and they just give you a bit of a background on Martin's upbringing and his life experiences pretty much up until age, I think we went to 21 so far. And then we're going to, the next episode, we're going to delve into his personal relationships. He had a girlfriend called Petra Wilmot, and he also struck up a very good friendship with Helen Harvey. Helen Harvey was the heir to the Tattersalls fortune, and basically when she died, she left all of her fortune to Martin, which was extensive. And that's another thing that the media has not particularly been keen to share. They've documented her net worth at about, well, his inheritance at about $625,000. So it's a lot of money in today's day and age, but back in 1996, it was obviously a lot more, so to speak. But they didn't include the actual shares, the income shares for the Tattersalls fortune. So there is a suggestion that her net worth could have been somewhere up to the amount of like 28 million. So we're going to be following the money on that one. And when Martin was arrested and charged, he basically has an IQ of 66. So his mental capacity is that of a 10-year-old, basically. And he was deemed unfit to manage his own finances. So the state trustees had a guardianship hearing, and they took over the management of his finances. And from that point on, the money disappears. So it certainly wasn't given to the victims of crime. They did not receive any compensation from that amount of money. They've received very little, actually, and we'll discuss that when we watch some interviews with some of the victims and the survivors and family of survivors, and might I add, who categorically denied that Martin was the shooter, basically. So a victim laying on the floor who has been shot, pretending to play dead whilst the shooter steps over them, comes forward and says, wasn't Martin. What have they got to gain out of that? Just putting that out there. All right. So without further ado, let me try and make sure I'm saving this and sharing it properly to both presentation aspects. It's really bizarre how they've set up this new format, because you can see yourself twice, but we'll give it a go nonetheless. Okay, add to stage. Okay, so hopefully if you're watching on your mobile device whilst I'm live, could you let me know in chat whether or not you get a good a good visual, basically, because I'll have to play with the format otherwise. Now, let me see what's the best way to watch that. No. Maybe I'll do a picture in picture. What's about that? What if? What if? What if? Let's have a look at this. See if I can adapt this one to fit. If that goes like that, maybe, and then that. Hey, get back here. I'll write that on there. Come on. Oh. Okie dokie. We'll go with that for a minute. Oh, I need to change the format to a square. Okay, that's better. Fit that. Okay. Now we're getting somewhere. Now you can go there. And you can come forward. Come on. Come on. There you go. I don't want to be that big. Why isn't that working? Forward. Okay. And that's better. Okay. Where there's a will, there is definitely a way, apparently. And it's my story and I was sticking to it. I would like to be able to see the rest of that, but never mind. Okay. Let's see if that works. That doesn't appear to be the one that I just created. Nope. Oh, look, that might do. All right. Let's do it, shall we? Let's get into it.
(28th, 1996), in the city of Hobart, on the island of Tasmania.
Let me know if you can all hear that.
At the end of the world. Looking out from Hobart's majestic port, at the southern end of the island, there is nothing but frigid waters and the icy wasteland of Antarctica beyond. And although Tasmania's dimensions are distorted on a globe to look larger than it really is, you can fly over the entire island in about 30 minutes. In 1996, Tasmania had a population of just 460,000 people. Its capital city, Hobart, only 126,000. A small settlement, forged from the harsh prison colonies of the British Empire. The place very much feels like a lonely last bastion of humanity, at the end of all things. At 6 a.m., 28-year-old Martin Bryant woke to the sound of his alarm clock. Stirring next to him was his girlfriend, 20-year-old Petra Wilmot. The night before, they had eaten dinner at the home of Bryant's mother, just down the street from them in the Hobart suburb of Newtown, before drinking and dancing until midnight at a now defunct sticky-floored hole called the Cadillac Club. Martin and Petra had not been dating long, but enjoyed each other's company. Nothing serious. Just frequenting trendy bars, clubs, and making short jaunts into the countryside where Petra had grown up. Mostly, however, they just spent time casually hanging out, blissfully doing nothing in particular. 2 weeks earlier, in mid-April, in the middle of one of their rambling hangouts, Petra had accompanied her new boyfriend on a quick errand to the Meyer department store in central Hobart. Martin Bryant wanted to buy a sports bag and was very particular about the size, even bringing a tape measure with him. Bryant said it was for his Tai Chi equipment, but this was a lie. The large blue tennis bag he eventually selected was going to contain guns. Lots of guns. Some serious hardware. And a veritable boatload of ammunition. Petra liked her new boyfriend, and his quiet, gentle ways. He was tall. He had a square jaw, and a somewhat statuesque bone structure. He had long blonde hair, raggedly worn in the grunge style popular in the mid-1990s. A few days earlier, Petra and her boyfriend had spent Anzac Day together in the countryside, taking gleeful and carefree happy snaps of each other on camera. They very much seemed like a young couple enjoying a spell of puppy love. But the morning of April 28th was different. As they ate breakfast, Martin Bryant told Petra he needed to be alone that morning. He had a few things to take care of. But, he said, maybe they could hang out later that day. These words were hollow. He had no intention of doing so. Petra departed Bryant's house shortly after 8 o'clock. At precisely 9:47 a.m., Martin Bryant set his security alarm and stepped out into the chilly autumn air, because, of course, late April in the southern hemisphere signaled a slow descent into a rather gloomy Tasmanian winter, very different from the rest of Australia. Inner Hobart is built to resemble an old-fashioned European city, with cobbled streets and splendid 19th century architecture, combined with a much cooler climate than mainland Australia, and the roving populations of deer introduced by early settlers. You'd be forgiven if you thought, back to reality.
Get to the
Inside was an AR-15 semi-automatic rifle, an SLR semi-automatic rifle, a bolt-action hunting rifle, and a Daewoo 12-gauge shotgun. The bag also contained 2 pairs of handcuffs, a long hunting knife, rope, several cans of gasoline, kindling, a camcorder, and box after box of rifle and shotgun ammunition. To be clear, a semi-automatic rifle is not a machine gun. You cannot just hold down the trigger and spray a torrent of death. It's one trigger pull, one bullet. Semi-automatic means that the empty cartridge is ejected and a new bullet loaded automatically, just as you would get from a typical handgun, allowing the rifleman to sustain a much faster rate of fire. Semi-automatic rifles, like the ones Bryant loaded into his car that day, are also fairly powerful. The AR-15, for instance, can potentially pierce metal from a quarter mile away. Such, at any rate, was the 28-year-old's arsenal. Not that Bryant had a license to own or operate any of these weapons. Martin Bryant climbed into the car and began the 90-minute drive to the Tasman Peninsula, 60 miles south.
It's simple things like that that portray him as crazy. And crazy he was not.
East of Hobart, and his final destination at the tip of the landmass, Port Arthur, population just 200. Port Arthur is a World Heritage Site and tourist spot because of its cluster of 11 ruined buildings that had once formed a 19th century prison, the Alcatraz of the Southern Hemisphere. Port Arthur was the place where British convicts who were already in Australia were taken if they reoffended. From 1833 to 1877, it was a prison for the hardest of hard knocks that employed a combination of corporal punishment and psychological torture. Several convicts just murdered other prisoners so they could be executed and no longer go on living in the place. Over 1,600 graves surround the prison. Only 180, those of prison staff and soldiers, are marked. On the day of April 28, 1996, over 600 tourists would wander amongst the ruins, all potential targets for Bryant's guns. Half an hour into his journey, Martin Bryant pulled into the small town of Midway Point and stopped at a convenience store. He bought a lighter for his gasoline and kindling. He did not even wait for his change. 15 minutes down the road, Bryant made another stop in the town of Sorel, where he inexplicably bought a bottle of ketchup. Then it was on to the town of Forset, where he pulled into a service station and bought a cup of coffee. Chatting with the station owner, Bryant said he was going surfing that day at Roaring Beach. The service station owner thought this was odd, because the conditions that day were calm, and there weren't going to be any large waves.
That doesn't matter to
A little further down the road, Martin Bryant arrived in the town of
Right.
Tirana, where he topped up his car with fuel, and then pulled off the Arthur Highway and drove a short distance to the Seascape Guest House. It was a 2-story pink and white cottage that provided a stunning view of the Tasman Peninsula and the ocean beyond. Seascape was owned by David and Nolene Martin, aged 72 and 69 respectively. They had just waved off a couple of tourists who had been staying with them. Martin Bryant's yellow Volvo pulled up their gravel driveway at 11:15 a.m. David and Nolene were inside, cleaning up after their guests. Bryant knocked on the door of the cottage. He knew the elderly couple. In 1992, Bryant's father had tried to buy the Seascape Guest House, but the Martins had beaten him to the purchase. He had tried to buy another property from the Martins.
This is actually one of those things that it's not been proven. They are using this as a motive for Martin. Well, that's what's depicted in the mainstream media narrative as a motive, basically, as to why they were unalived, because it was like a revenge, because they wouldn't sell the property to his father, which makes absolutely no sense, because Martin was super uber duper rich, and yeah, there was no evidence of that.
Who owned several holiday homes in the area, but was refused. Bryant's father had killed himself the following year in 1993. His son held a grudge against the elderly couple, blaming them for his father's untimely end. And so, as Nolene Martin approached the door of the cottage, Bryant quickly shouldered and aimed his AR-15. When Nolene swung open the door, Bryant shot her in the shoulder. She went down. Then Bryant stormed into the house, pulling out his hunting knife from its sheath as he went,
That's never been found,
and stabbed David Martin in the guts with it. The 72-year-old man crumpled to the floor. Bryant stuffed a cloth gag in his mouth. Then he caved in Nolene's skull with 5 bashes from an unidentified blunt object. Afterward, he shot David Martin in the head. Having just committed double murder, Bryant closed the door to the cottage and began the next phase of his plan. Many more people were going to die that day. Meet Martin Bryant. Martin John Bryant was born on May 7th, 1967,
I love the Jamaican
in
bits.
Hobart, Tasmania, to Maurice, a dock worker, and Carleen, a laborer in a chocolate factory. The birth notice in the Hobart Mercury newspaper described Martin as a bouncing boy, which in mid-20th century slang means the baby was healthy and full of vigor. As a newborn, Martin completely rejected breastfeeding, and as an infant,
pure evil then.
he was averse to any sign of physical affection from his parents. Once he started walking at 16.
Now, if you want the actual full biography of Martin from birth, there is 2 videos linked to this playlist that give you the accurate details. I mean, he's got the dates and everything correct, but there are things in that people have that have been inserted basically to make him look like he's was born for this, basically.
18 months old, Martin
Because he
would
didn't
constantly
breastfeed.
try to escape the house, with his parents once finding him on top of the neighbor's chicken coop,
That's true.
and another time on a swing set, some distance away on the other side of the railroad tracks.
Yep.
As such, Carleen Bryant fashioned a harness and a leash, and kept Martin confined to the veranda so she could perform house chores. Otherwise, if she took her eyes off him for even a second, he would always try to escape. By the time Martin was 3 years old, his parents had become alarmed by his slow speech development and stunted motor skills. The young boy also seemed incapable of using his imagination to entertain himself, and any toys he was given he would simply destroy. Carlene described her son as constantly acting out, going out of his way to be annoying, and showing fits of temper. Many toddlers are like this. They can be troublesome, but this was every waking hour of every day.
Oh my God.
Beyond the rages, Martin appeared to be emotionless and rather vacant behind the eyes. And, again, he had no time for kisses or cuddles from his mother.
He's a monster.
Martin's parents began to suspect there was something seriously wrong with him, and Carlene gave up on any sort of normal mother-son relationship altogether. Her day-to-day routine became one of vigilance, logistics, and survival. To stop him from smashing things, to stop him from running off, and to prevent him from eating inanimate objects. He once had to be taken to hospital after swallowing a carpenter's nail. Meanwhile, Maurice's response was to figure out what the problem was and to try and, quote-unquote, normalize the boy. Find the problem, fix the problem. When, in 1972, Martin's sister Lindy came along, she developed without any sort of behavioral or intellectual abnormality. And because of where things went, I will state, there is no evidence whatsoever that Martin or Lindy were subjected to child abuse.
No.
In 1973, the Bryants enrolled Martin in a fee-paying primary school operated by the Quakers, which had a fantastic reputation, in an attempt to come to grips with Martin's slow development. The report from his first year was that his behavior was aggressive and destructive. He failed to make friends, and his language skills were extremely poor. In 1974, he was assessed by a child specialist who said that Martin might have an intellectual disability.
You think?
His low intelligence seemed to surprise people, since he gave no outward physical sign of being mentally impaired. He just looked like a cute little blonde kid,
So mental health
straight out of a wholesome family
So
sitcom.
on the outside?
Then, when people began
Are you
to
supposed to get a tattoo on your forehead to say I have mental health issues or I am intellectually disabled? No.
see Martin behave aggressively, strangely, or stupidly, they were surprised and dismayed. This remained a pattern throughout his entire life, as he grew from a cute little blonde kid into a strapping young man with an IQ of 60.
66.
Given his lack of progress at the fee-paying Quaker school, Martin's parents decided to save their money and transfer him to the government-run Newtown Primary School. Martin's efforts to make friends there were interpreted as aggravating rather than endearing, such as his common practice of sneaking up behind other students and jumping on their backs. As a result, Martin was a loner and sometimes was bullied, with gangs of students chasing him through the streets after school until he burst into tears.
His intellectual disability gave him, made him very socially inept, not knowing how to read social cues and maintain relationships and that type of thing.
But, in turn, Martin went out of his way to bully children who were smaller than him. It is difficult to determine which came first. Meanwhile, Martin proved incapable of either writing or mathematics.
Correct.
And the only school activities that he seemed to have...
Correct. He did. He was illiterate. Completely illiterate. So you got that right. But let me show you. Amazingly enough, let me go back on that. Maybe I didn't save it. That's it. Oh, there's the weapons. I'll bring those up in a second. But yes, amazingly, given the fact that he was totally illiterate, there was a lovely, very neat confession and a lovely, fairly well scaled map of the cafe, and it showed where all the tables were, where he was standing, the direction of the bullets, and the bodies, and where the exits were, and yeah, pretty impressive for someone who's illiterate. Just saying.
Any interest in were arts and crafts. Martin would frequently disrupt the class and merely laugh when teachers tried to reprimand him. He seemed to have a limited understanding of right and wrong, and never displayed any remorse. The teachers would often wind up kicking Martin out of the classroom, so they could just get on with the lesson, and Martin would spend the rest of the day in the halls, or the playground, or just wandering the neighborhood. One time, at a swimming class, Martin removed a snorkel from another boy while the boy was diving, nearly drowning him. In 1977, in grade 4, Martin was given a 2-day suspension for disruptive behavior, during which his parents got him assessed by a child psychologist. The report reveals that Martin not only had an intellectual disability, but he had been torturing animals. Combined with the rejection of all parental affection, the emotionless behavior.
Okay, that's big one, number one. There is absolutely no evidence whatsoever of any animal cruelty at all. In fact, it's the opposite. So, let me switch this back. Maybe not. Oh, let's see what that does. No. Yes, so absolutely no any documented records of animal cruelty. He actually loved animals. You see in his police interview, they were talking about the guns and, where he used to go and practice learning to shoot and what have you, do practice shots. And he explained to them that he used to go up to this bush spot and practice up there. And they asked him what he used for his targets. And he said, tin can. They said, do you use tin cans and stuff? And he said, yeah. And they said, what about bottles? And he's like, oh, no, because that would harm the animals. The broken glass could harm the animals. So he knew enough to say that and to explain why he didn't do that. So, and this is before he was ever charged, so it's not like he was trying to insert something that could be used later down the track, because even when he had no idea in the police interviews what on earth they were talking about. No idea. None. And we'll get to that. But yes, animal cruelty, not. And also, his friendship with Helen Harvey was reinforced because of their love of animals. And she actually was quite an eccentric recluse, and she had lots and lots and lots of animals. And there came a time where the council actually had to come in and remove some of them because the living conditions there were subpar, let's say. There was no cleanup of the fecal matter of these animals. And I think she must have had something like 40 cats in her garage. That's, yes. So no animal cruelty. Okay. That is big one, number one.
And the inability to relate to others. It seems quite clear in retrospect that Martin was a congenital psychopath, born without the capacity to feel empathy or put himself in the shoes of others. No compassion, no remorse. And while congenital psychopaths
never, ever, ever in any of his psychiatric evaluations is there any record of any psychosis or schizophrenia or psychological diagnoses of that nature. Basically, none. This is conflation from the media.
Past like Ted Bundy.
Oh,
Eventually learned
let's
to
make a
age.
comparison to a serial killer, shall we? Let's just make it. Oh, and this is how mainstream media gets their point across. And the more you say it, the more it's assumed as fact. And it's not. In fact, it is
Bullshit. Bullshit.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now let me find where that my there we go. Ooh, no. Ooh, no. I lost my spot again. That'll do.
Human emotion and manipulate people in order to get what they want. Martin Bryant had an intellectual disability.
Correct.
He'd forever be a low-functioning psychopath,
Still a psychopath.
never fully understanding others, quickly wearing out his welcome with new acquaintances, seeing no problem with cruelty or crime, if he could avoid punishment. He was an overgrown toddler, randomly engaging in mindless acts of aggression, indulging in selfishness and half-baked lies, and never fully comprehending right and wrong, or the consequences of his actions. In 1979, when Martin was 12 years old, he made it onto the local news, but not in a good way. Martin had been taken to hospital with severe burns, allegedly sustained from playing with fireworks. The burns were so bad that Martin was missing several weeks of school. The initially sympathetic reporter asked...
Now, that's important to remember, actually, because you saw what Martin looked like in the hospital bed just then, and they actually labelled that as severe. Now, after the Seascape Cottages, Martin actually had severe third-degree burns to his back, or actually to quite a bit of his body surface. But his hospital stay was 6 days. 6. So this gentleman is saying that, let's have a look at the picture of him in hospital again so you can see. Yeah, looks like severe burns to me. It was playing with fireworks, so he would have got a few spots and what have you on his face and arms. And that was enough to have a few weeks off school. So what would severe third-degree burns require? More than 6 days. Let's just put it at that.
When Martin was 12 years old, he made it onto the local news that Martin was missing several weeks of school. The initially sympathetic reporter asked Martin, "You're going to be here for a while longer, aren't you?" "Yeah, about a week," said Martin. The reporter followed up with, "Do you think you'll be playing with firecrackers anymore?"
Yeah.
"Yes," answered Martin. With slight exasperation creeping into her voice, the reporter asked, "Don't you think you've learned a lesson from this?" Martin replied, "Yes, but I'm still going to play with them."
And that is an answer that you would expect from a child, because that's exactly what his mental capacity was, a child. And that you need to remember that actual concept whilst you're watching his police interviews and what have you, because he reacts. People made that out to be that he had no empathy and was a psychopath because he didn't care, and he didn't show any emotion because, these 35 people are dead and, he's sitting there laughing. He has no comprehension of it. He doesn't know why he's there, and he does not understand the what's happening, what's going on. So he can't, even if he did understand it, even if he did know what he was there for, his reaction is a 10-year-old reaction, not an adult reaction. So you need to keep that in mind whenever you see him basically talking or reacting or responding to anything.
12-year-old, resting in bed with his arms folded behind his head, gave the impression he was just a young delinquent with a bad attitude. His relatively normal appearance giving no clue that he was intellectually impaired or incapable of putting two and two together. Don't want to get burned? Don't play with fireworks again. As far as Martin was concerned, a bad thing had happened, he was in hospital, and he couldn't wait to play with fireworks again because fireworks were fun. He certainly didn't have the social intelligence to tell the reporter what she obviously wanted to hear. But the situation might be even more alarming. Martin's schoolmates have since claimed he wasn't playing with fireworks, but with fire. According to their version of events, while at the beach, Martin had poured gasoline all over himself and then deliberately set himself alight. A bunch of teenagers tackled him to the ground and rolled him around in the sand to extinguish the flames.
Bullshit.
Then they fetched Martin's horrified mother, and the boy was taken to hospital. Apparently, Martin Bryant was in the habit of wandering up and down the beach with a can of gasoline, threatening to pour it on people's campfires. If this version is true, then Martin's parents must have instructed him to tell the reporter he'd been playing with fireworks instead.
Is that not the responsible thing to do when you're reporting something and telling a story? Yeah.
Martin was perfectly capable of lying. He did so often.
Yeah.
And this was a decidedly less bizarre.
Doesn't make
and
him a mass
sinister
murderer, though,
story
does it?
for the television. The following year, 1980, Martin Bryant was enrolled in special education classes at Newtown High School. Special ed, when it's good, can help students with a variety of limitations to reach their true potential. But it appeared that special ed at Newtown High was one of those programs designed to just sweep students under the rug, to get them out of the way, while teaching staff focused their attentions on their regular duties and students who required no such special help.
Nowadays, you get, assigned someone to assist them in the classroom and what have you. But back then, no. He should have had a formulated, he should have been formally assessed on how he learns, because a lot of people learn different ways, especially with what I believe is probably an undiagnosed ADHD. And again, back those days, they didn't know a great deal about that. They were just a troublesome child or a hyperactive child or whatever they used to call it. Because my brother was born around the same time and was diagnosed with ADHD. So I watched him grow up with no one really understanding the concept of that and how to deal with it and how to treat it and how to educate them. So I've got like that first-hand experience of what society and regular, normal, healthy, not that you're not unhealthy, but, the average student learns, and that's what the education system is designed to teach the average person. But any deviance from that, they really didn't understand or know how to best educate them. And it's the same with everything. Every personality is different, and even though you may have a diagnosis of something like ADHD, you may not learn in the same way as the next person diagnosed with the same thing, because we're all individuals. Our brain functions at different levels and in many different ways. It's a complex organ. So there is not one fit for all type of thing. Every person needs a full evaluation on how they learn, be it visual or audio or whatever, and have an education plan in place to support that, so that it is the best environment for them to be able to learn adequately and without feeling like they're not good enough or different.
After a few perfunctory reports that said Martin was off to a good start and gradually making progress, his academic performance and relations with other students deteriorated. He didn't try at all in any class except woodworking and art. He rarely spoke. Other students began to refer to him as...
And that's because he didn't understand. And if he tried to do something and failed, you're going to stop eventually, aren't you? That's human nature.
the Shadow.
He did have some nasty...
In 1981, for Martin's 14th birthday, his father made the mistake of giving him an air rifle. Martin became obsessed with it. He would hide in the nearby creek and fire the gun at passing cars. At night, he would fire it randomly across the bay.
Completely wrong.
The neighbors once saw him shoot a parrot out of a tree, walk up to it, and then shoot it several more times in the head until the bird's tiny...
That is all bullshit. The whole lot. Absolutely all of it. Bullshit.
Skull was obliterated. Martin would also shoot rabbits, flay them, and then carry the carcasses around the neighborhood, knocking on doors, hoping to sell people the meat. Back in special ed, the teacher instructed the students to talk about what they did on the weekend. Martin talked about torturing Echidna. Martin briefly made a friend, a schoolmate named Greg Leahy. One day they were walking to the Bryant home, and Greg witnessed Martin pick up a cat, seize its legs, and try to tear it apart with his bare hands. Greg forced Martin to let the cat go, relatively unharmed. Another time, Greg was along with the Bryants on a fishing trip, and Martin thrust a spear at him as if to stab him. Martin's father, Maurice, made the boy apologize to Greg. On 3 separate occasions during the summer of 1981, Martin aimed his air rifle at Greg and pulled the trigger. The gun was unloaded, and Martin always treated this as a hilarious joke. Then, when Martin and Greg were spearfishing off the Tasman Peninsula, Martin used the tip of the spear gun to stab Greg in the head. Again, Martin thought this was hilarious. Greg's wetsuit prevented serious injury, and after the boys got to shore...
You have a wetsuit on your head, do you? Really? Really?
Greg punched Martin in the face, stalked off, and had nothing more to do.
There was absolutely no evidence or anything documented anywhere. No police reports. Nothing. Zip. Nada.
On May 6th, 1983, the day before Martin's 16th birthday, his parents withdrew him from school.
I think he actually left. It was the day before his 16th birthday. They didn't withdraw him.
Stranger than fiction. For the rest of 1983, Martin Bryant laid about the house watching TV, occasionally going out to fire his air rifle or torment some animals. His father's attempts to find an entry-level unskilled labor job proved fruitless.
So at this point, his father has become his carer, basically, and takes over a lot of the supervision of him because Carleen could not control him.
Martin made a bit of pocket money by doing very basic handiwork and gardening around the neighborhood.
Correct.
In February 1984, Martin was taken to another psychologist, this time to get a diagnosis for his intellectual disability, in order to get him on welfare. Dr. Eric Cunningham Dax.
You mean, hang on. Welfare, like it's a handout, like it's a bum. No. In fact, it was called the Disability Support Pension. There is a difference. And if you have a diagnosed intellectual disability and you cannot maintain employment, then you are entitled to the Disability Support Pension. And there are obviously criteria and factors that you need to meet to be able to be eligible to receive such a thing. I know this because I'm on it and I had to jump through those same hoops. So, yeah. So this is even more evidence that his intellectual capacity was subpar or subnormal. Okay, you need to remember that when trying to evaluate for yourself what his behavior is displaying, or what he is actually showing, and instead of what they want you to hear or see as him being an absolute Looney Tune. Now, we will be going into every one of these. He had, I think, 4 or 5 psychological assessments, and Cunningham Dax was one of them. And he was pretty sure he was the one that diagnosed the intellectual disability, or no, personality disorder. Severe personality disorder, I think. And his assessment, in my opinion, was probably the most valid, and it's the best one to be able to compare to the one that he had once he was charged with the Port Arthur Massacre, because the psychiatrist in that evaluation compared to the one he had with Cunningham Dax, and that Dr. Eric Cunningham Dax was a very well-renowned and groundbreaking psychiatrist for that time. He'd come out from the UK, and there are quite a number of things that he brought to the mental health community as far as standards and evaluations and what have you goes. So he contributed a great deal to the mental health sector. So his evaluation, that in my opinion, is probably the most accurate. There is also a bit of controversy with him in that he was linked to Tavistock Industries, which had some affiliate links. So I haven't actually gone down that rabbit hole yet. I've touched on it, and I'm still in the middle of researching it. But it is said that they were involved with with what's called MK Ultra, which is like a mind control CIA type sleeper agent type of brainwashing. I don't know if you call it a cult program, whatever. But we will be delving into that. And I actually, as soon as I heard it, I went, what a load of shit. What a load of crap. Don't start talking about, was he mind controlled into this and, hypnotized to do that. And funnily enough, let me just go big stream. Funnily enough, I am concentrating on 2 cases at the moment. This being one of them. So this is, based in Tasmania, Australia, back in 1996. And the subject of MK Ultra raises its head, and I've never heard of them before. And the second case that I'm covering is the Kentucky sheriff that shot the judge in his chambers last year, 2024, in September. And lo and behold, MK Ultra is a part of that one as well. And 2 completely different cases of true crime from opposite ends of the world, and for some reason they both have affiliation with MK Ultra. So I will be doing a bit of a deep dive on that one, just because I figured the universe is telling me I need to. So we'll get to that when we get there. But this, if you use Eric Cunningham Dax as your baseline and then compare it to his psych assessment once he's been arrested and charged, there are the differences.
With Martin, who was unable or unwilling to concentrate on their conversation. He would constantly interrupt, one time to ask about the age of the psychologist's office and the fireplace in the room. Dax confirmed Martin's intellectual disability, and also concluded that he was unemployable because he would likely antagonize his employer and colleagues. Cannot read or write, does a bit of gardening, and watches TV. Only parents' efforts that prevent further deterioration.
There is the wording there. Very, very important. It's only that his parents' efforts that prevent further deterioration. Okay? That's important because Carleen, in her, the way she perceives this result is that he is not able to be helped at all, and doesn't know how to parent that. And her and her husband had very, very different parenting styles. So I think this was a point where she threw up her hands and just went, I don't know what to do.
Could be schizophrenic.
Never diagnosed. Never ever.
And parents face a bleak future with him.
No, they face a challenging future.
And so, at age 16, Martin Bryant was signed up for a lifelong disability pension.
There you go.
He continued to live with his parents, who managed his money to prevent him from spending too much at once or on something particularly foolish. And Martin continued to do handiwork and gardening off the books. Otherwise, he spent his days indulging his quiet, strange, and sometimes violent behaviors.
Rubbish. So now he's a what is it? He dodges his taxes as well. Are you for real? Now. Oh, I hadn't shared the screen. Sorry. I can see it. You just can't. Let me get back there. Nope. That'll do. So this is Lindy. Lindy is Martin's younger sister. And I really feel for this girl. She has been in this shadow of having a brother that is a monster, because that's what he's been portrayed to be. And has, I believe, suffered a great deal from that. So much so that she's basically, you cannot find her anywhere. She's moved, changed her name, and created her own separate life. And I don't blame her for it. But it could have all been avoided and unnecessary had the people that were responsible for Martin's welfare done the right thing by Martin.
As his sister, Lindy, grew older and made friends, Martin started shouting abuse at them when they came over, or threatening them over the phone when they called the house.
That's rubbish too.
Martin spent the next 3 years in the situation, with his father, Maurice, governing much of his day-to-day. Maurice lined up.
Now, let me see. Where is it? I have the actual interview of that with my Carleen. You keep watching and I will find this video.
Various odd jobs for Martin and tried to keep the boy out of trouble. And it was a mammoth task, requiring his father's constant vigilance and reprimands. But unlike many of Martin's former teachers, the boy usually did what Maurice told him to. In early 1987, when Martin was 19, he was walking through his neighborhood when he spotted a large house at 30 Clare Street with a horrendously overgrown garden. He walked up to the front door, knocked, and offered his services. The woman who answered the door was 54-year-old Helen Harvey, one of the heirs to the Tattersall lottery fortune. The Tattersall lottery was founded by George Adams, who became immensely wealthy from his cut of the ticket sales, the significant portion of each draw not handed over to lotto winners. Adams had no children, so when he died in 1904, one of the beneficiaries of his will was Adams's general manager, David Harvey, Helen's grandfather. When he died in 1927, part of the fortune passed to Helen's father, Lorimer, and when he died, Helen inherited an investment income worth roughly $450,000 per year in modern money. Despite her wealth,
Now that's the
Helen
bit
Harvey
that-
kept a job working.
That's the bit I said at the start where her net worth was worth. What her net worth was worth. Because the shares were an income stream, like an income asset. And he's saying $450,000 a year on top of the documented 600,000 that he got with regards to her cash and property. So there you go. So that would have been ongoing. There is no evidence of those shares being sold. There is no evidence of anything that we can find so far from when he was arrested. What happened to that, all that money? And you cannot obtain the records from the state trustees either. And any other record, just out of interest, any of the investigations or information on the Port Arthur Massacre and Martin Bryant, all those records have been sealed to the highest level of the Attorney General, and they were actually due to be released in 2026, but when Paul Motor started researching and asking questions back 9 years ago, when he wanted to actually do a documentary on Port Arthur, and so started his research and found that a lot of the things didn't add up. And 9 years later, he's still doing it. So yeah, when he started poking around, they extended the sealing of the files for another 75 years. So why would you do that? And it's not to protect the victims.
For Tasmanian Railways for a few years until, in 1961, at age 28, she quit to spend the rest of her life living alone with her mother Hilza at 30 Clare Street. The two women became recluses, hoarders, and kept literally dozens of cats and dogs. In 1987, when she met Martin, 54-year-old Helen Harvey was viewed by locals as a harmless eccentric. She'd pop down to the shops and chat with the clerks about how she used to be friends with Errol Flynn or Rock Hudson. She didn't bathe. She stank.
Gross.
And she was missing several teeth and was highly obese.
Oh.
Back home, she and her 76-year-old mother lived in the most appalling squalor. Helen hired 19-year-old Martin Bryant to clear her yard, a task that took several days, and then to regularly mow her lawn from that point forward. He was also tasked with feeding the 17 dogs that lived in the house and the 40 cats that inhabited the garage. Martin was not asked to clean, and the house remained highly unsanitary, with dog shit and random trash all over the floor, the stench of rotting meat, and dirty dishes in the sink that were never cleaned. One bowl in the microwave accumulated so much mold that it had grown out of the bowl, out of the microwave, and spread across the wall to the vent above the oven. Helen and Martin struck up a bizarre friendship. They began taking day trips all over Hobart together, and people began to assume that Martin was Helen's son. And in case you're wondering, according to all available sources, Helen and Martin did not have a sexual relationship.
I'm glad
But she lavished gifts on him. This included cars.
It's her friend.
Helen and Martin would walk into a dealership, and Martin would point to the car that he liked, despite not having a driver's license, and Helen would pay in cash. Then, a few weeks later, they'd sell the car at a loss and buy a new one. Helen Harvey is thought to have bought and sold upwards of 60 cars during her lifetime, mostly during a splurge in the 1970s, and again after she met Martin. Very often, in their trips around town, Helen did the driving, and Martin would suddenly reach over from the passenger seat and yank the wheel to the side as his idea of a joke. Helen had 3 car accidents and several near misses as a result. She began telling people that she never drove over 60 kilometers per hour, that's 37 miles per hour, when Martin was in the car. For his part, Martin began driving without a license in whatever vehicle Helen had gifted him. In 1990, Martin stormed out of his house after an argument with his father and went to live with Helen and her mother Hilza full-time. In June of that year, someone tipped off the health authorities about the state of 30 Clare Street. So much rubbish had accumulated in the house, and the 2 women's health had so thoroughly deteriorated that they were unable to go upstairs and were sleeping in beds in the utterly filthy kitchen. During the day, Hilza Harvey would sit in a rickety old chair, wasting away, staring into space, and drooling on herself. Health agents arrived and quickly called an ambulance. Paramedics had to do an obstacle course over old furniture and piles of junk. Hilza had a range of illnesses and a broken hip. Helen had several infected ulcers. Hilza was hospitalized for a few weeks, then taken to a nursing home, where she died shortly afterward, at the end of July. Helen was treated for infected ulcers and eventually made a full recovery. The RSPCA removed the cats and dogs from the house, and Hobart City Council ordered a mandatory cleanup of the place. The task fell to Martin and his father, Maurice, who took long service leave from his job at the docks. The cleanup took 3 months. They filled several dozen skips, that's to say, dumpsters, with garbage. They used garden tools to scrape the dried layers of grime, mold, and other filth from the walls and floorboards. Once the house was completely cleared out, Helen and Martin moved back in together and began accumulating junk again. The cycle at 30 Clare Street began anew. The odd couple also went through a dozen more cars. However, one habit did not resurface. The RSPCA banned Helen Harvey from keeping any more animals on the property. In 1991, Martin had to be reassessed by a psychologist to maintain his disability pension, which he was still collecting despite living with the wealthy Helen. The shrink again found that Martin was intellectually disabled and unable to hold down a regular job. The psychologist also attached the following note to his analysis that portrays a much darker picture. Father protects him from any occasion of bad tempting as he continually threatens violence.
Note the difference in the wording. Instead of it being parents, it prevents further deterioration, it's now that he's continually violent and threatening. Now, I'm going to bring up this is Martin Bryant. This is her interview with 60 Minutes. And I'm not sure whereabouts it is, but we'll play it and find out.
He will never be free, will he?
No.
Who will visit him when you're no longer around?
Nobody.
Probably nobody. I'm the only person who visits at the moment.
What's his physical condition today?
He's overweight.
He's a man in
Too
his
much
40s.
overweight, mainly from through the medication, which puts weight on, and also lack of exercise.
And his psychological condition, his mental state.
He's not allowed to tell you.
That's confidential. Even if I knew, I couldn't talk about it. All I can say is that Martin was diagnosed about 3 years ago as having Asperger's syndrome. And he's happy where he is at the moment.
That sounds scripted to you?
Martin Bryant is difficult to interview. A softly spoken woman who has arguably been as damaged by the events of that day
In some way, for all these crimes.
It was a killing rampage.
Well, yes.
Well, although you convinced him. But are you really saying that you think if he'd had a trial, although you convinced him to plead guilty, he might have
Convinced
got
him
off?
to plead guilty. You convinced him to plead guilty. Really? 5.5 months Martin was incarcerated before, once he was arrested and charged. And he was pleading not guilty until his own defense attorney, John Avery, coerced him into making a guilty plea. And he did so by using his mother. He made his mother tell Martin that if he didn't plead guilty, that he would not see her or his sister again. And if you think I'm full of shit, John Avery says it in his own words.
Yes.
Is that
Because Martin always, when he was questioned,
Hey, well, does he want?
probably for weeks before I saw him again,
Welcome.
he always said he was never in Port Arthur at Broad Arrow.
and you believed him?
Yes. There's no evidence that Martin was there.
But none of that was needed because Martin said in court, yes, I did it. And you went along with it.
And why did he say that? Why? Because he was coerced. And I apologise, Wild Aussie woman. I'll turn this one down. It's the echo will be me, not the actual video.
Exactly.
And now you wish you hadn't.
Of course, I'll regret it for the rest of my life. A lot of people on that day came forward after, and people who knew Martin had known Martin for years. And they said, as far as they were concerned, they didn't recognise the gunman as being Martin Bryant.
So many people would be very upset to hear you deny that this happened as people.
Because it didn't.
Understand it happened. What do you say to them?
But there's also a lot of people that realise that Martin didn't have a trial and that there was no evidence
Whatsoever.
proven
Mhm.
whether he was the gunman.
But did you ever get the chance to ask him, did you do it, son? Did you ask him that?
I did, but I didn't get any answer.
And
He
then after
hasn't
that,
talked
he doesn't
about
want
it.
to see you.
No, that's right. Because he's frightened I'm going to ask questions.
Whatever else people say about you, you're a loyal mother.
I am sure. I know there'll be a lot of people out there that'll be condemning me for even coming on this program, but I want to be able to help Martin.
To have to live with what one's child has done and what has happened to one's child as a result must be a terrible burden.
Well, overweight.
He's a man in
Too
his
much
40s.
overweight, mainly from
So that day,
being held accountable in some way for all these crimes.
it was a killing rampage that ranks among the deadliest of the. And the evidence against him was never tested at a trial. But are you really saying that you think if he'd had a trial, although you convinced him to plead guilty, he might have got off?
Well, yes.
There is somewhere in this
Because Martin
interview,
always,
maybe it's here.
yeah, I don't know, with terrible frustration. Martin was different, I'll put it that way.
It's here.
But as far as abusing people and being
It is
nasty,
here. All right. So this is what that the other content creator is telling you about him being cruel and threatening other people. This is the actual explanation as to that.
no.
How is it that your view is so different from the one that has been
You
so
go back.
widely reported?
With terrible frustration. Martin was different, I'll put it that way. But as far as abusing people and being nasty, no.
How is it that your view is so different from the one that has been so widely reported?
Because the one that's
Well,
widely
I mean,
reported is incorrect, and it is done with an agenda. Hello. The perfect Patsy.
His mother, I know what he was like. Yes, he was annoying, like most boys are, especially with their sisters. But as he got older and Lindy started bringing a few friends home, or they would bring her up, he started turning very nasty towards them.
And what form did that take?
He'd just shout at them and tell them not to ring
That's nasty.
anymore.
That's nasty.
And abuse them if they came there to the house.
So
Did you
that's nasty and threatening. They've conflated that into something that Roosevelt says. Where is it? Where is she? Where's Lindy on here? Come on.
PCA banned Helen Harvey from keeping any more animals on the property.
There.
Spent the next 3 years in this living money by doing very basic handiwork and gardening around the neighborhood. In February 1980, parents' efforts that prevent further deterioration were threatening them over the phone when they called the house
So
and
this
gardening
is what
off the
it's evolved
books.
to.
Otherwise, he spent his days indulging his quiet, strange, and sometimes violent behaviors.
Not violent.
As his sister, Lindy, grew older and made friends, Martin started shouting abuse at them when they came over or threatening them over the phone when they called the house. Martin spent the next 3 years in this living psychologist to maintain his disability pension, which he was still collecting despite living with the wealthy Helen.
He can collect a disability pension. He is not in a relationship with Helen. He is a single man, and despite whether or not she showers him with gifts, has no impact whatsoever on his pension. Simple as that. And yeah, the insinuation is there.
The shrink again found that Martin was intellectually disabled and unable to hold down a regular job. The psychologist also attached the following note.
Attached the following notes. Okay, this is his insertion post arrest. Not like there's an agenda there, but you know, it just happens that these pop up now.
To his analysis that portrays
Ah,
a much
sorry, wrong screen.
darker picture. Father protects him from any occasion that might upset him, as he continually threatens violence.
Mhm.
Martin tells me he would like to go around shooting people.
Really?
It is unsafe to let Martin out of his parents' control.
So that evolved from, where was it? It's up here. That. That. Okay, there's a difference. Baseline to bullshit. From baseline to bullshit.
Martin tells me he would like to go around shooting people. It is unsafe to let Martin out of his parents' control. Maurice Bryant felt that this assessment confirmed his fears. He knew that Martin would be unable to cope after his death and would likely run into trouble. He wrote up a will, splitting the house between his children, Martin and Lindy, upon Maurice and his wife's passing. Maurice also bequeathed his $250,000 superannuation pension to Martin, in the hopes the money would be used to hire a caretaker. Maurice must have spoken to Helen Harvey about all this, because 3 weeks later, she also drew up a will, leaving all of her property and her considerable investment income to Martin. Upon both of their deaths, Martin Bryant, a high school dropout, unable to hold a job, stood to become a wealthy man. The Country Squire. In late 1991,
It was spelled
Helen and Martin moved to a 29-hectare farm near the village of Copping, about 45 minutes' drive east of Hobart, so they could own animals again. In addition to cats and dogs, they also purchased horses, ponies, and a pig, the last of which shared a room with Martin. To say that the animals were poorly looked after is an understatement. Feeding was irregular, grooming and washing non-existent. Neither Helen nor Martin knew what they were doing. Feces inevitably piled up. One local spotted a herd of horses starving in a bare paddock, while the paddock next to them was green with grass. On their frequent trips into Copping, Helen and Martin would leave a gaggle of cats and dogs in the back seat. More than once, locals saw a pony relaxing in the back of the car instead. Meanwhile, Martin started dressing in tweed blazers like a country squire, topped off with a silk cravat, lizard skin shoes, and a Panama hat. When the neighbors, Mrs. Featherstone and her 16-year-old daughter, arrived at the farm to greet the new arrivals, Helen invited them inside and instructed Martin to make them a cup of tea. He did so, served it to them, and then promptly told the two women to get out. Helen told the Featherstones to ignore him, but they quickly finished their tea and left. Following them outside, Martin said to the women, "Don't come back here again, or I'll shoot you." Martin started carrying his arrows wherever he went, and took delight in firing upon tourists who stopped to buy apples at a fruit stall on the highway near the farm.
like how they put that picture up just to make sure that you get the message that he's a psycho. Let's go back to what that said.
Farm.
Don't come back here again or I'll shoot you. And insert crazy picture.
Don't come back here again, or I'll shoot you. Martin started carrying his air rifle with him wherever he went,
And that's
and took
bullshit,
delight
dude.
in firing upon tourists who stopped to buy
Bullshit.
apples at a fruit stall on
Bullshit.
the highway near the farm. He would also
Complete
roam the
bullshit.
countryside at night, shooting the air rifle at dogs that barked at him.
Complete bullshit.
Martin would occasionally take the bus to Hobart or Port Arthur instead of driving, and he would harass the bus driver and other passengers, particularly young women. Eventually,
There is absolutely nothing at all to collaborate that. No police reports, no previous history, no criminal history, nothing. No complaints. Zip. Zero nada. Nothing. Nothing. It's like, let's make him out to fit the narrative. Because there's so much community pressure to get a conviction and they want to feel safe in their beds at night. Well,
drivers just didn't stop for Martin, and he'd chase after the vehicle, screaming and swearing. Needless to say, the locals went out of their way to avoid Martin. Things got so bad that the owner of the neighboring farm, John Featherstone, told his wife and children to avoid Martin Bryant at all costs. And he
really?
relayed a message to Martin via Helen that if Featherstone ever saw Martin on his property, he would shoot him, and not with an air rifle.
No complaints. Listen.
As a wealthy eccentric, Helen Harvey was tolerated by the villagers in Copping, though rumors abounded about the nature of her relationship with Martin.
That's true.
She told people the truth, that Martin was quote-unquote simple, but did not get on with his father, so she looked after him as her ward. Whenever Martin acted inappropriately, which was often, it was Helen who would bring him by to apologize. Sometimes Martin would say sorry, but didn't seem to mean it, and sometimes Martin would simply shake the person's hand and
Hello.
not utter a word. The rare visitor to Helen and Martin's farm, those who were not threatened with
Tis
violence
I.
or ignored it, noticed that the place was a mess, with animal feces and trash on the floor, and with fat wads of cash strewn around the house, on bookshelves
Fat
and in
wads of
empty
cash.
ice cream containers.
Sounds like my house. Fat wads
Although
of cash
Helen was the more
strewn
harmless
around.
of the two, the general consensus around Copping was that both of them were nuts. After nearly a year of this, On October 20th, 1992, Helen and Martin were returning by car to Copping after buying groceries and animal feed in the town of Sorel. They had 3 dogs in the back seat. Helen was driving. About 2 kilometers from the village, the car suddenly veered into oncoming traffic and smashed directly into another vehicle. Helen's neck was snapped, and she died instantly. Martin's
Now, before he says any more, I haven't seen this, but I guarantee you, he's going to say that it was Martin's fault. He caused the accident, and she died under suspicious circumstances. But they forget he spent 7 months in the hospital because he sustained severe injuries from the accident also.
received severe neck and back injuries
Yeah.
and spent 7 months recovering in
look.
hospital. 2 of the dogs in the back seat were killed,
Yeah.
and the other one survived with minor injuries. Although this has never been confirmed, it is likely that Martin had caused the accident by doing
Told
his
ya.
bizarre joke of suddenly yanking the steering wheel while Helen was trying to drive.
Never been
It would
confirmed.
explain the car suddenly careening into traffic.
At
given-
least he said that. At least. It's never been confirmed. Most people don't. They just go in and fill it full of bullshit.
That Martin could also have been killed. It was unlikely
Yes.
to have been attempted murder, but rather Martin had acted erratically, without full
Possibly.
understanding of the consequences.
Exactly.
he always
Because why? Because he was of mental capacity of a 10-year-old.
At a stroke, 25-year-old Martin Bryant became a wealthy man, inheriting Helen Harvey's domestic real estate assets of $1.2 million.
Now, whilst you hear this, just think to yourself how terrible his life must be with all of these things.
In modern money, along with a huge investment income of $450,000 a year. While Martin recuperated in hospital, Maurice took over the running of the farm, cleaning the place up and disposing of most of the animals, either by selling them or shooting them.
Oh,
Maurice told the
really?
neighbors that he was just winding things up at the farm, and Martin would not be returning. In May 1993, Martin left hospital and briefly stayed at his parents' house before moving into Helen's old mansion at 30 Clare Street in Hobart, alone. Martin felt the loss of Helen keenly. In order to replace the companionship,
It's almost like because of that, their similar intellectual disabilities and their learning, capacities and what have you, they sort of had this kindred spirit. They were on the same sort of similar age, basically, and they both got on because of that.
Martin began pestering children as young as 9
Oh.
to play games with him. However, the kids weren't having it. One neighbor recalled, the kids were wary of him. They understood instinctively that he was someone to stay away from. He was just a little
Bullshit.
scary.
Bullshit.
In the aftermath of Helen's death, Maurice Bryant fell into a depression. The burden of dealing with his increasingly deranged son had fallen solely on him again.
Yeah.
He visited a doctor and got a prescription for prothidin, a tricyclic antidepressant. Maurice also made
Tricyclic.
moves to remove his son's
Tricyclic antidepressant. You mean tricyclic? Tricyclic.
control over his considerable fortune. Under the Mental Health Act, Maurice applied to have the money transferred to a group of trustees who would dole out the money to Martin.
No. That wasn't his. No, he didn't instigate that. It did go to state trustees, yes, but there was a guardianship hearing about that because they deemed him unfit to manage his affairs. So for someone who is so unfit, who can't manage their own affairs and money, cannot read or write, is capable of planning and plotting to massacre 35 people and injuring 29 more, coordinating that with a 17-hour siege, and his motive was because he was rich and had a girlfriend and was traveling overseas constantly. That makes perfect sense.
Last for his entire lifetime. The paperwork was completed in late
Last for his entire lifetime? What? Is that not enough for you? What? The $625,000 from Helen Harvey, plus the $450 a year income stream every year, plus his father's estate, that's not enough for him. Let me just go back on that because I want to hear what he says again.
Under the Mental Health Act, Maurice applied to have the money transferred to a group of trustees who would dole out the money to Martin and make it last for his entire lifetime. The paperwork was completed in
wasn't enough
late
to last.
1993 under the supervision of Martin's mother, Carlene.
All right.
Meanwhile-
And just to reinforce that money never, ever went to the victims of the crime, ever. It's disappeared. It's gone. Poof. Never to be seen again.
Maurice put all his bank accounts in his wife's name and signed the accounts for the house utilities over to her. On August 13th, 1993, Maurice Bryant drove to the farm in Copping. At 7:30 p.m., he phoned his wife in Hobart and told her he loved her. He phoned his daughter, Lindy, in Queensland and told her the same. He did not make a call to his son. The next morning, August 14th, a local arrived at the farm to buy a horse trailer that Maurice was selling off. He saw a note pinned to the front door that read, "Call the police." The man did so, and shortly afterward, Constable Gary Whittle arrived at the farm to find no one there.
This is sad.
Aside from the note, there was nothing amiss, though Whittle did find a bag containing several $1,000s in a vehicle. A search party was arranged for Maurice Bryant, involving police and the local fire department. Maurice Bryant's body was not found anywhere in the house or in the fields.
Nope. it was
On
a
August
dam.
15th, the search was widened to the surrounding hills, but still without success. On August 16th, divers were brought in to search the 4 dams that were on the property. Maurice Bryant's body was found in the dam nearest to the farmhouse, submerged in about 3 meters of water.
There actually are some reports that even suggest that Martin had a hand in this as well.
He had a diving belt wrapped like a bandolier across his torso. He had heavily sedated himself with 18 30-milligram tablets of an anti-anxiety drug called Cerevax and drowned himself. The death of Helen Harvey in 1992
And his father.
and Maurice Bryant in 1993 removed the last strong constraints on Martin Bryant's erratic and often
Rubbish.
threatening behavior. His mother, Carlene, remained in his life, but she was not a disciplinarian who could enact a measure of control.
She didn't know how
And
to
although
be-
Maurice Bryant had hoped that some of Martin's fortune would go toward a caregiver, this did not transpire.
Mm-mm.
Martin spent his considerable monthly stipend on whatever he liked. So he drifted.
He
And
went
was lonely,
overseas. He travelled.
and his mental health continued to deteriorate. The full force of the psychopathy and stupidity. of Martin-
There is no psychosis. I will show you the reports from all psychologists. They all state there is no episodes or evidence of any psychosis whatsoever.
Bryant, with all its attendant and potential menace, was about to be unleashed upon the world.
Oh my god. Now let's layer it. Let's
Although
layer it on thick.
Maurice's death was very likely a suicide, almost everyone in
Very
Copping
likely a suicide. It was. It was. Stop it.
suspected Martin of killing his father.
See?
It did not help that during the search, Martin did not seem distressed and spent the time idly brush cutting the grass while other people were searching. People in Copping accused
Why?
Martin to his
Why? Because he was intellectually disabled. He did not know the consequences. He didn't understand it. So he just went on as normal, like he normally did. And that's what you see in the police interviews. Does not understand the consequences of that, of what's happened yet.
face, making him feel the full extent of the community's rejection.
Now, Joe, while I say that, just excuse me, just have that in your head. So if you are a 10-year-old child and you're told that you are now being charged and sentenced for the unaliving of 35 people, and you cannot really comprehend that and all it entails, including the 35 consecutive life sentences. This man has been in prison for 30 years and has not been allowed to see anybody except his mother. What do you think has been going through his head for 30 years? How has he justified, like, what has he come up with to explain why he's there and why he's being punished? That would just be the biggest torment ever. It's horrible. It's Disgraceful.
action. Martin later sold the copying farm for $143,000 or $312,000 in modern money and continued to live at 30 Clare Street in Hobart. The 143 grand, most notably, managed to escape the control of Martin's trustees under the Mental Health Act. It gave him a bit of mad money on top of
Bit
his
of mad
regular
money.
stipend.
Mad money now, is it?
After his father's death,
Ooh.
Martin Bryant began drinking heavily. He was merely a social drinker before,
Oh,
but
dear.
now he began consuming large quantities alone. In keeping with his childlike personality, Martin's favorite beverages were sweet drinks like port, Baileys, and Sambuca, the last of which reminded him of the taste of licorice. Over the next 2 years, his average consumption gradually escalated to half a bottle of Sambuca consumed at breakfast
Really?
and an entire bottle of Baileys consumed throughout the
Lovely.
day. To
You
this,
found that
he added a
information out
smattering of other
where?
sweet wines and liqueurs. And although Martin was once fined by police for driving without a license, by some miracle, he was never caught in a DUI. Gradually,
that.
he began to fixate on David and Noeline Martin,
Really?
elderly owners of several guest houses and B&Bs in the
He became fixated. It's descriptive, if nothing else.
countryside, as the people were responsible for his father's death. Maurice Bryant had tried to purchase Seascape Guest House
This
in
is bullshit.
1992, but David and
This is them trying to establish a motive.
Noeline had beaten him to it. When Maurice had tried to purchase another guest house off them, they refused the sale. Maurice had made a comment to his son that David and Noeline were hogging the market. Martin Bryant must have attached undue weight to that statement
Bullshit.
and began thinking of David and
Bullshit.
Noeline as evil people, villains in a Disney film.
Villains
When Maurice
in a
died,
Disney film.
Martin somehow made a connection in his mind that David and Noeline were somehow at fault.
I've done that before. It's easy. It's beautiful. You just and none of this mixing it with milk rubbish either. It's got to be on ice. I have to make a point. It's me making a point of pointing out the bullshit.
A month after Maurice killed himself, Martin Bryant bumped into a woman
And
named
that's our debate buzzer.
Marion Larner in downtown Hobart. Marion was a married woman several years Martin's senior, who lived on a farm with her husband, Roger, nearby the Port
Roger
Arthur
that.
historic site. Martin had first met the Larners as a 13-year-old boy when the Bryant family made a day trip out there. Meeting her again as a 25-year-old man, Martin began to fixate on Marion.
Really?
Over the next few weeks, he bombarded her with seemingly friendly phone calls. But the frequency of the calls got so bad that Marion contacted the police. The cops got in touch with Martin and gave him a warning.
Really?
The calls abruptly stopped.
Didn't document it.
In general, Martin
Oh, let's
Bryant
insert
got rather
crazy picture
aggressive
again.
in his pursuit of women after his father's death, perhaps spurred on by the booze. He would constantly approach women in public, with his opening line being, "Would you like to have dinner with me?" Most often, Martin was rejected or
Bullshit.
was given a fake number,
Bullshit.
but occasionally a woman would let Martin buy her a meal and then never contact him again. Given what the dinner conversation was likely to have been with Martin Bryant, you can't exactly blame them.
Really?
Waitresses and shop assistants in downtown Hobart became familiar with Martin and were reluctant to serve him due to the things
Bullshit.
he'd say.
Bullshit.
For example, he once asked a waitress about the ice cream they had on the menu and then leaned in and whispered that he'd like to lick it from her body.
Oh my
Another
god.
time, Martin
Oh my god. This just gets worse and worse. You like my new hat? I need to get one that says bullshit. oh, hang on. I've got something similar. Where is it? I just remembered. Yeah. Nah. Oh, look, it's, hang on. Clip that. Oh, I cracked myself up. No, that's that's hillbilly true crime. She's covering the Judge Mullins and Mickey Stein's Letcher County sheriff shoots a judge. That's who that is, because she's full of it. Oh dear. All right, now let me go back and take that off. I can't see the likeness whatsoever. Oh, maybe I'll put it here. There we go. Yeah. Now, whilst I've stopped, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. It really helps us out. And we, as I said, we've got another 7 episodes of this. I'm not finished yet, but we've got 7 episodes of this deep dive into Martin Bryant and the Port Arthur Massacre to go. And we will be doing analysis on all of the psychiatrists, all of the whole story. We're breaking it down and, well, not debunking it, but we're showing the real story, so to speak. The bits that weren't ever made available to the public because there was never, ever a trial. And why? Because Martin Bryant's rights were never, ever upheld, both on a legal sense and under the Disability Act because of his intellectual disability, and humanitarian, the way he was treated in hospital after he was admitted from the siege and with the 3rd-degree burns. It's disgusting. What happened to innocent until proven guilty? I know they got him from the cottages where he was arrested, and yes, he was there. But once you actually hear and listen and see what transpired, yeah, okay, I'll leave that to.
Approached a heavily pregnant woman in a shopping mall and began stroking her belly.
Oh my God.
He was eventually banned
Bullshit.
from that mall.
Bullshit.
In December 1993, Martin used a bit of his money to travel to Melbourne for the first time, and then traveled on to Singapore, where he stayed in a luxurious hotel for 3 days. Returning home,
He actually
Martin
traveled
discovered that he
many
had some
times
neighbors,
overseas.
the Kuiper men, Harry and Anitra, and their 3 children. Although they had heard numerous rumors about Martin, in conversation they merely got the impression that he was quite simple in the head. So they decided, quote, the Christian thing to do was to treat him like anybody else,
Yes.
until he gave us reason to do otherwise.
Let me say
For the
that.
first
And
8
reason?
weeks, things went relatively well. Anitra Kuiper took note that Martin conducted conversation like a 2-year-old. Half the time, he wouldn't respond to a question or statement and would just bring up something entirely unrelated.
Yep.
But he seemed harmless, like a puppy. He had a childlike smile and frequently giggled.
Yep.
For his part, Martin forbore from
Now
telling
remember that, because that's exactly what he does in the police interview. Exactly. And it's not because he's not empathetic. It's not because he's a psychopath or sociopath. It's because that's what he does. He's intellectually disabled. So there is a pattern of behavior. And this is prior to the shootings. Okay? Pattern of behavior.
animals, being sexually suggestive, or making any serious threats of violence in Anitra's presence. Martin also socialized with Kuiper's 3 kids, who were 13, 11, and 9. He gave them full run of his yard and the inside of his house. He went to Kmart and bought them all $26 water guns.
Well, that's
or
generous. What a
$55
lovely
in modern
person.
money, so they could all stage water fights in the garden
Yeah.
together. Several times, Martin took the 3 kids and Anitra into Hobart and treated them all to a shopping spree, just like
extremely.
Helen used to do with him.
He is an absolute mass murderer. Yeah, no doubt about it.
And then he bought them all ice cream and took
Oh,
them to the movies. Martin's mother, Carlene, who knew him better than anyone, got wind of this and phoned Anitra to tell her that she shouldn't let Martin drive them anywhere and to not let the kids get too close to him. Carlene did not supply a clear reason, but from that point forward, Anitra started insisting on driving them all on their shopping trips herself, and she would not let the kids go over to Martin's house for longer than 20 minutes unobserved.
can you imagine what
Nevertheless,
Martin thought
Martin's
about that?
fixation on the Kuiper kids grew, particularly
Not fixation. He would be totally like, what? What's going on? Why aren't they allowed? And obviously going over there and saying, can they come over? And being told no, but that's a fixation. He wasn't aware of what had gone on in the background, allegedly had gone on in the background, and he's searching for answers, as anybody would.
On their 13-year-old daughter. After 8 weeks had elapsed, with the 3 kids being Martin's best friends, they were over at his house, and he suggested they play a game of cards. He produced a deck of cards that had pornographic images on them. When the kids told their parents, Harry Kuiper went over and told Martin to stop hanging around them. Martin said,
Oh, God.
I suppose my mother's been phoning you.
Oh,
Harry replied, No, Martin, we really love you.
Bullshit.
You're very
Bullshit.
generous to the kids. But we can't have you showing them pornography. It's not anything your mother has done. It's what you did. Martin wouldn't accept it. And over the next 2 months, he tried to reestablish relations. One time, he knocked on the Kuiper's front door and gave Anitra flowers. Another time, less harmlessly,
Oh,
he asked if he could
let's put
take
another crazy picture up. Just reinforce it. Crazy, crazy. Told ya. There's a picture to prove it.
13-year-old daughter to dinner. And whenever he saw the kids out in the neighborhood, he would wave and suggest they come over sometime.
Yeah.
The kids would reply positively, but never went
he's
over to
friends.
Martin's house. They had firm instructions to give him a wide berth. The kids, even the young 9-year-old, understood that Martin was not quite right in the head. And so, Martin Bryant was alone again. He started frequenting a local cafe for afternoon tea, dressed in a
Oh,
linen
that's horrible. Oh, that's exactly what a psychopath would do. Let's go and have coffee.
suit with his Panama hat.
I like how they sprinkle the bits of the truth in there into the bullshit.
And lizard skin shoes. He also brought with him an empty briefcase and told the servers that he was an important businessman who earned $800 a week.
Yep. What else would you do? You think a 10-year-old with all this money? That's exactly what I would do. Yes, he's flaunting his wealth and made it known, which, in my opinion, makes him a prime target.
After tea, Martin returned home
Being
to
taken
get ready
advantage
for
of,
dinner
basically.
at a North Hobart restaurant he always frequented. He wore an electric blue suit and ruffled shirt with flared trousers. He again
He's
repeated
dressed
the
up.
lie that
He's
he
a
was an
10-year-old.
important businessman. The owner recalled, quote, "It was horrible. Everyone was laughing at him, even the customers.
Now,
I suddenly felt
this is
really sorry
important.
for him."
This is important because this reinforced to Martin about all of the bullying that he'd received at school. And so this was his biggest fear. This was his biggest vulnerability and insecurity. People laughing at him and making him, like, telling him that he was stupid and an idiot. And that is what his defense attorney, Avery, used against him to coerce a guilty plea.
I realized this guy didn't have any friends. He was like a child,
Yep.
trying
he
to
was.
impress everybody.
Yes.
He struck me as an eager sort of young guy, like a Labrador puppy.
Yeah. So
In April 19
like a Labrador puppy. Does that sound like someone who's about to who's pent up with rage, who is threatening and violent and, cruel to animals, the whole lot? They contrast so much. And you yes. See, in his mind, he's a kid. He's not thinking about the consequences. He's playing dress ups. He's having fun. He's got the money. He can do it. Why not? Who's he hurting? Nobody. But it was his biggest insecurity and vulnerability, and that was used against him. You'll see as we get to that point.
In 94, a couple months after things fell apart with the Kuipers, Martin spent
So
some of his
April 94, 2 years before Port Arthur.
money on a round-the-world trip to Melbourne, Bangkok, London, Stockholm, and Los Angeles. before
Sounds
flying
horrible,
home on
doesn't
May
it?
7th. He had booked 2 weeks in Disneyland, but left after the third day when it rained. From April 1994 to December 1995,
Wow, it was a killer.
Martin Bryant visited Europe 6 times,
Yeah.
the USA 3 times,
Yeah.
and Southeast
It's a
Asia.
terrible life. Awful. Must be full of horrible experiences. So much so you want to go and shoot the cafe up. Post haste.
3 times, along with making single trips to New Zealand and Japan. He joined a frequent flyer program and traveled business class.
Why
He
not?
also made a dozen domestic trips to Queensland, New South Wales,
Good
and
on
South
him.
Australia. But his favorite place in the country was to visit Melbourne, where he apparently liked to visit the zoo. While staying in the UK, Martin
Evil
checked into an
bastard.
expensive hotel. A few minutes later, Martin came down from the room and announced it was too hot and he was checking out. When the staff offered to fix the cooling for him, he refused. When they offered him a refund, Martin told them they could keep it as a tip. The unusual behavior was reported to the police.
Oh, God.
They contacted authorities in Tasmania to run a background
Really?
check.
They rang the police because he said, my room's too hot, and he made them keep their money. Can you not? Sorry.
Check on Martin. They were told that Martin had been fined
Jen,
for driving without a
hello.
license, but otherwise had a clean record. Another time, when returning to Tasmania from the United States, some of his bags got lost and wound up in Melbourne. Customs officers examined the luggage and seized 4 pornographic videos.
Oh,
depicting
fucking
bestiality.
bullshit. Bullshit.
Martin Bryant later told a psychologist that his favorite part of traveling was the long flights. Not the destinations, landmarks, or swanky hotels, but the 20-odd hours in the air. To quote
And?
psychiatrist Dr. Paul
Really?
Mullen,
Really? So that's indicative, is it, of a mass murderer? Because he enjoyed being in the plane. If it wasn't so ridiculous.
it transpired that the attraction of the long airplane journey was that he could speak to the people next to him, who presumably, being trapped in their seats, had no choice but
Oh,
at least appear
really?
friendly to him.
That's why. Of
Let
course.
that sink
Why
in.
didn't I think of that?
Martin Bryant was willing to pay thousands of dollars to spend a few hours talking to someone who was more or less compelled to be nice
Yeah,
to him.
he wanted friends.
He had been an outcast at school and lost the only friend he had by threatening the boy with violence. He was an outcast as a young adult, and after Helen Harvey's death, he'd lost the only person who ever really tolerated him. The rest of his existence consisted of his bizarre and sometimes menacing behavior alienating
I've emailed you the link if you want to jump in.
people. Low-functioning congenital psychopathy aside, Martin Bryant was lonely.
Low
He couldn't
functioning
understand what
psychopathy. Low functioning psychopathy. Never, ever, ever is that on any of the assessments as a diagnosis or any evidence of that behavior. Okay, sweetheart, no worries.
he was doing wrong. Bryant himself said he was suicidal around this time. Seems like
What's that buzzing? Oh, this me making a point of him telling bullshit. I have to point it out.
if mental health authorities had recognized the problem and intervened with regular therapy and medication,
That's right.
the grisly and tragic
yeah, yes.
end to Martin Bryant's case might well have been avoided. Once, when Martin was flying
It's that crazy picture again.
home from London, he was seated next to a 23-year-old female law student at the University of Tasmania. Apparently, the conversation was not a total disaster, and she was friendly with him the whole time. Martin alternated between telling the woman he was a farmer or a carpenter, but couldn't keep his story straight. He said he hadn't worked since his father's death. At the end of their conversation, Martin invited the young woman to come live with him in a big house on Clare Street. After the flight, he phoned his mother and told her he'd met the woman he was going to marry. But, needless to say, the young law student did not move into Clare Street. Prior to another one of his trips, Martin called the travel agency and asked what the rules were about carrying firearms on airplanes.
Oh, really?
The travel agent told Martin to call the airport to get the precise information. He did so, and his call was reported to the police.
Really? No
Given
record
his
of that.
mental health record, with its many sinister notes and warnings,
Sinister notes. No, the sinister notes came in from Paul Mullen, which was after he was arrested and charged, not before.
it is unlikely that Martin could ever have gotten a license and purchased a gun. Not that
He
he ever
didn't have one.
tried. Instead, Martin was purchasing weapons under the table from vendors by paying them a premium in cash. For instance, Martin later divulged that he had bought his AR-15 for $5,000 or $10,650 in modern Australian money, about 5 or 6 times the going rate for a mid-tier model in America. He did target practice in the countryside
Wait for
by
it.
shooting at trees. In 1995, Martin got himself a girlfriend. She was a 16-year-old school leaver
Petra
named
Wilmot.
Janetta.
Oh,
Martin
wrong one.
was 27. They had met because their mothers attended the same church. To be clear, the age of consent in Tasmania at the time was 16. But there was certainly a stigma against a man in his late 20s dating a teenager. Martin tried to buy Janetta's affections, showering her with expensive gifts
he doesn't know
and
how else
taking
to
her
do
on
it.
trips.
Who has taught him how to romance? Where has he seen that? Like,
He refrained from discussing or threatening violence. To Janetta, Martin was just a tall,
he
blonde.
refrained from discussing violence. Hang on. Hey, he's making that out like that's a conscious choice. Let me just go back and hear that.
The age of consent in Tasmania at the time was
So
16.
the insinuation here is that, you know, he's a pedo, for a start. And then this.
But there was certainly a stigma against a man in his late 20s dating a teenager. Martin tried to buy Janetta's affections, showering her with expensive gifts and taking her on trips. He refrained from discussing or threatening violence.
He refrained from discussing or threatening violence. The fuck?
To Janetta, Martin was just a tall, blonde, rich, and incredibly stupid young man.
All right. And that there is probably the very best description of Martin ever on the face of the planet. Right there. That's what he's guilty of. That. So let's lock him up for 35 life sentences consecutively.
He was quiet. He was gentle. He was oddly childish. One time, when they were in Sydney, Martin pretended to read the Age newspaper
Yep.
in an attempt to
To
seem
make
intelligent.
make himself look better, because that's what he saw other people doing. He can't read it, but he sat there and did it just to make himself look, because that's what everyone else did. Such a psychopath.
Janetta knew he was just trying to impress her and went
And
along.
this isn't Janetta. This is, where the fuck did you get Janetta from? This is Petra. I've got the video of Petra telling this story in an interview. What the fuck?
with it. Another time, Martin and Janetta made a day trip south of Hobart in a
Unless-
small boat.
Unless Petra is short for Janetta?
They were just pottering around the coastline with no clear destination. in
Oh,
mind.
okay. Yes, listen to this. This is Petra too. She tells this story. So this is the behavior of someone who has been described as built up, pent up rage. Okay, if someone is like that, how would they react to this situation? I bet you it's not how. What was it, Jodie? I missed your answer. Oh, hang on. It's me. So basically, I'm showing you this video because this is the perfect example of what the mainstream media's narrative is about Martin Bryant. And I'm debunking it, showing you that this is actually what happened. And each of those points, I have a buzzer that goes like this. In other words, to make a point, that's the point that this is wrong. It's incorrect. That's what I was making. That's your buzzing noise.
The boat engine broke down, and the current started to take them further and further from shore. Martin panicked and burst into tears, screaming that he didn't want to die.
Psychopath.
Janetta, the 16-year-old girl, kept calm and comforted him until they were rescued.
Built up with rage.
On a trip to Surfer's Paradise in Queensland, Martin proposed to Janetta, who refused. She told him point blank that he was a bit too dim and reckless, and they couldn't build a future together. She broke up
Really?
with Martin after the trip. They occasionally ran
Sounds
into
like
each
she's
other
a
in Hobart.
bitch.
Martin always asked Janetta to dinner. She always said no. Janetta was Martin's first and last long-term girlfriend before his brief fling with Petra Wilmot in the autumn of 1996, just before all hell broke loose.
I don't understand that because I've got video of an interview with Petra Wilmot telling both of those stories. Just saying.
Countdown to Armageddon. Sometime in early 1996, Martin Bryant drove out to Seascape Guest House, on the edge of the Tasman Peninsula, roughly 80 minutes east of Hobart. There, he met David and Noeline Martin, who owned the house, along with several other holiday properties in the area. The purpose of his visit, Bryant revealed, was to buy Seascape, just like his father had attempted to do in 1992.
Oh, shit.
David and Noeline said
He
they
did
weren't
actually make
interested
an offer,
in selling
but
the place. Martin
that wasn't his
pressed them
intent.
and offered them a huge sum of money, many times what the property was worth. In his mind, he was trying to correct a wrong that had led to his father's death. Noeline replied that they weren't interested in selling, no matter how much money Martin offered them. We do not know what Martin's reaction was, or whether he threatened violence.
Really?
What we do know is,
Let's see
sometime after
that.
the encounter, Martin Bryant decided to murder David and Noeline.
Really? You do know that, do you?
In
You
early
know
March.
that. You know that. Yeah? Well, you know that. Big call. It was never proven, was it? No. No. Why? Why? Well, let me see. Perhaps being coerced by your attorney to plead guilty and blackmailed to do it. Maybe that had something to do with it. Just saying.
1996, Martin placed a classified ad in the newspaper searching for a gardener for 30 Clare Street. One of the people who answered the ad was 20-year-old TAFE student Petra Wilmot. She thought it would be an easy way to earn a little extra money. Martin hired her, and before she had even so much as pushed a leaf, asked her out. Martin
Good on him.
splashed less cash on Petra than on Janetta, and he didn't take her on any fancy trips outside Tasmania, just a few drives into the countryside. Martin was also careful not to fly into a temper or discuss violence around
He
her.
was careful not to fly into a temper or discuss violence around her. Is it just me? Is that not just so fucking blatantly obvious that it is ridiculous? Like, so he's saying, oh, I've got me a girlfriend. Oh, I better make a mental note not to discuss violence or shit around her. Because that's exactly what a 10-year-old would think, wouldn't it? Apparently, he didn't know the consequences to his actions. So why would he even think to do that? Why? Next, he'll be making fucking 2:27 a.m. Google searches.
As far as she knew, Martin was just a gentle, quiet young man.
Oh, as far as she knew, Martin was just a gentle, quiet young man who avoided talking about violence with her. Sounds fair.
They genuinely seemed to enjoy each other's company. On March
Wow.
13th, 1996, news circulated around the world of the Dunblane Massacre in Scotland. Former shopkeeper and suspected pedophile Thomas Watt Hamilton had
Oh, really? And suspected pedophile. I'm going to have to deep on that one. Hang on. Where's my pad? Oh, casting aspersions left, right, and centre. I'll play this. I'll go and get a pen. Good memento.
used 2 Browning pistols and 2 Smith & Wesson revolvers, along with 743 rounds of ammunition, to murder 16 children, all 5 years old, and 1 teacher at a primary school, before turning the gun on himself. It is theorized that the news of the Dunblane Massacre inspired Martin Bryant to commit a similar crime of his own. He wanted to murder David and Noeline, and he was feeling suicidal at the time. Bryant concluded that if he was going to murder 2 people and effectively end his life, he might as well make as big an impact on the world as possible by taking a bunch of strangers with him.
Bullshit!
Forensic psychologists hypothesize that the reason why shooters do this is for a feeling of power, to feel like they are leaving the world as a notorious and fearsome villain, rather than as the failure of a human being that they really are. According to Bryant's stunted and addled mind, he had a justification for murdering David and Noeline. They were responsible for his father's death. But there was no such justification for murdering a bunch of strangers. Martin's congenital psychopathy took care of that. He felt no
Bullshit.
empathy for them.
Bullshit!
They weren't innocent human beings. They were targets. a way for Martin to make his mark upon the world. Besides, most people in Martin's life had rejected him. Martin was incapable of reflecting that it was because of something he had done. Inappropriate comments, threats of violence, shooting people with an air rifle, and so forth. In Martin's mind, people rejected him because they were cold, wicked, and cruel. So, as far as Martin was concerned, everyone on the planet was fair game. He ignored the fact that several people in his own life, his parents, Helen Harvey, the Kuiper family, Petra Wilmot, had been kind to him. It did not occur to him that among the people he might kill, there could be others equally capable of kindness and understanding. Sometime in early April 1996, one of Martin Bryant's neighbors in Newtown, Nancy Dalton, ran into Martin while she was waiting for a taxi in front of the Purity supermarket. Nancy had known Martin from the neighborhood for several years and always felt sorry for him. She knew he felt alienated and lonely. And so, whenever she saw him out and about, she would take the time to have a chat. This time was no different. During their conversation, Martin suddenly said, "Come on a picnic with me this weekend. We could go for a nice drive. I could take you for lunch. I'll show you where Miss Harvey had a farm." Nancy politely declined, explaining that her grandchildren were visiting her that weekend. Sensing his frustration, Nancy asked if something was wrong. Martin replied, "I don't know. Nobody ever wants to listen to me or go with me. I'm getting fed up with this. I'll think of something. Something. Everybody will remember me." Nancy began to assure Martin that she would go with him for a picnic if she could, but Martin had already walked away and was hurrying towards his yellow Volvo. On April 25th, 1996, Martin and Petra spent Anzac Day together in the countryside at Richmond Historical Site. Although he and Petra
26, so this is 2 or 3 days before the massacre.
Petra had an enjoyable day, he seemed irritated by the tourists there. On the 26th, Martin and Petra had lunch in central Hobart. On April 27th, they went to a farmer's market and bought vegetables. That evening,
He must be
they went to
planning a
Carleen
massacre
Bryant's
then.
house for dinner. Carleen used the vegetables Martin and Petra had bought that day. Neither woman noticed anything particularly amiss with Martin, at least not more than usual. After dinner, Martin and Petra went dancing at the Cadillac Club and left sometime around midnight. Returning to 30 Clare Street, Martin set his alarm clock for 6 a.m.
You would think he'd want to get a good night's sleep with the busy day he had the next day, wouldn't you?
This was unusual. Martin never set his alarm clock. On April 28th, 1996, over breakfast, Martin explained to Petra that he had something to do that day. Petra left 30 Clare
This
Street
is
at
all
around
pure
8 a.m.
speculation right here.
Martin's usual practice was to drink half a bottle of Sambuca with breakfast,
Quite
when Petra wasn't there to catch him, of course. His alcoholism had intensified over the past 6 months, averaging about 20 to 30 standard units every 24 hours. But today, he remained dead sober. He left the house, taking his sports bag, containing 2 semi-automatic rifles, a bolt-action hunting rifle, and a 12-gauge shotgun with him. The bag also contained handcuffs, a hunting knife, rope, gasoline cans, a camcorder, and several boxes of ammunition. Martin got into his yellow Volvo and drove to Seascape Guest House, making 4 stops in various small towns along the way. He arrived at Seascape at 11:15 a.m. He shot 69-year-old Nolene Martin as she opened the door. Then he charged into the house and stabbed 72-year-old David Martin with his hunting knife. David probably watched as Bryant caved in his wife's skull with an unidentified blunt object. Then Bryant shot David in the head.
And you know the I like how he knows the actual order in which that occurred, because there was pretty much just ashes to determine that.
The door to the cottage and dragged the 2 corpses into a nearby bedroom, placing them on the bed. At 12:30 p.m., Maureen and John Mason, 2 tourists from mainland Australia, pulled up the gravel drive to Seascape Guest House. Bryant came outside and greeted them. He seemed agitated. His mannerisms were odd. The Masons explained that they had enjoyed their time in Tasmania so much that they wanted to inquire about prices at Seascape for a subsequent holiday. They also wanted to inspect the rooms of the cottage. Bryant said they couldn't come inside. He lied that his mother and father had gone out.
Did that make a difference? Because I've increased the volume on the video, but I can't find where to adjust it on here. But I'll keep looking. Oh, so is anyone watching on their mobile by any chance? Out of interest, because as I said at the start, StreamYard have now come up with a new layout in the studio, and they allow you to stream in portrait mode and landscape. And I was just wondering how it actually creates two streams. Can you actually see, like, is your screen a different, like, does it fill up the entire mobile screen, Tan? Yeah, because how's the guy? The guy's louder. I was able to turn the video down. Oh, okay, cool. All right, sweet. I'll try not to use it as much. I was making a point. Can you take a screenshot, please, of your mobile of what you're seeing so that I can see what you're seeing and know what to adjust? Should I need? Oh, I know. Should I need to? You have two streams going. Yeah, yes, that's right. Yep, that's how StreamYard have set it up now. It's just bizarre. It's bizarre because you have to set each one up independently. It doesn't just automatically do it, which is a pain in the butt. But it's nice to be able to stream in both layouts, provided that the layout is improved for, you know, if you're watching it in portrait mode. So,
Nat, quote, "I've got my girlfriend inside." Disappointed and slightly annoyed, the Masons got back into their car. As they drove away, Bryant stood on the front doorstep, his arms folded, watching them. Once the Masons were out of sight, Bryant locked the cottage, got into his Volvo, and tossed the keys to Seascape into his glove box. A short distance down the Arthur Highway, Bryant pulled over and spoke to two young women who were having car trouble. He told them that he was, quote, "going to the Isle of the Dead to get rid of some wasps."
Insert crazy photo. Thank you. Where did you send it? In Discord? Oh, okay. So you were logged in under the landscape one, but now you're in the portrait one and it fills up your entire phone. Is that right? Okay. Thank you. I'll have a look. But, you know, have a look at Mr. Crazy here. Oh, okay. I think you're in landscape mode too. So you need to flick to the other one. Now, I noticed when I went into YouTube, the one that is the portrait mode has a little like a little mobile icon in the title. So have a look at that and see if you get a different view, because it should fill up your entire screen. Basically, I don't know how to. Hang on, I will take a screen grab of what I can see and what it's supposed to look like, so you can compare. Ready, steady, spaghetti. And save. Pictures. Martin. I think that might be my groceries. Okay, let's bring it up. Image. Yeah. And let's add to stage. So that's what you should be seeing on the portrait mode. Oakley dokley. So yes, your layout is the wrong one. Oh, no, maybe it's not. Oh, I don't know. I have no idea. I just and I increased the size of the font for the chat too, so you can see it clearer on your mobile. Hopefully that helps. I'll decrease it again now and see if it makes a difference. And let me know. Thank you for doing that. It's hard to see what you're seeing. Let's go back to Crazy Face.
And by wasps, according to later reports, Bryant didn't mean insects.
I actually think this is where the wasp files get its name from. But now he's interpreting what Martin thinks wasps means.
He meant the slang for white Anglo-Saxon Protestants.
Oh, right. Okay.
Bryant bought some pot
Let's add some racism to the pot, shall we? For fuck's sake.
from the two women and suggested they meet up later in Port Arthur and hang out. Then he drove on his merry way, leaving the two women to sort out the car for themselves. At 12:45 p.m., Bryant arrived at the outskirts of the Port Arthur historic site. Here, he pulled onto Palmer's Lookout Road and stopped at the farmhouse of Roger Larner. Bryant spoke to Roger about buying some cattle from him, then mused about buying Seascape from the Martins. Then Bryant asked if he could say hello to Roger's wife, Marion. This set off alarm bells in Roger's mind. Bryant had run into Marion Larner in Hobart 3 years earlier, in 1993, and afterward had bombarded Marion with phone calls until the cops told Bryant to stop. And so, with this in mind, Roger said he'd accompany Bryant to the farmhouse, while the latter said hello to his wife. Bryant's smile faded, and he muttered something about coming back later. He got back into his Volvo and sped away. The road into the Port Arthur historic site was slow going. It was littered with cars and tour buses. After arguing with an information guide about where he could park, Bryant pulled into a spot on the waterfront at 1:25 p.m. He got out of his car, taking his large, heavy sports bag with him. He walked into the Broad Arrow Cafe, where 60 people were having lunch. He strolled up to the counter and ordered a tray of food, a soda, and a cup of fruit juice. He headed out to the patio,
Really?
ate,
That's
and drank.
weird.
A Melbourne couple sitting near him heard Bryant muttering about wasps and how there weren't many Japanese tourists there that day. After finishing his lunch, Bryant went back into the cafe, placed his big bag of guns on a vacant table in the corner, and unzipped it.
Oh, dramatic music.
The Port Arthur Massacre. Sitting 2 tables away from Martin Bryant were Mick Sargent, his girlfriend Kate Scott, and their friend Caroline Villiers. They were visiting from Perth. Mick Sargent had observed Bryant walk into the restaurant and wondered why anyone would carry around such a heavy bag with them. Sargent saw Bryant unzip the bag, take out a camcorder, turn it on, and place it on the table in front of him. It was at this point that Sargent caught Bryant's eye. By Sargent's reckoning, the two men stared each other down for about 10 to 15 seconds, each unwilling to look away. Sargent thought that Bryant looked pissed off and could tell that he wasn't completely right in the head.
This is
Then his girlfriend,
absolute
Kate Scott, said something to
makeup.
Sargent, and he looked back at her. When Sargent glanced up again, he saw that Bryant was now staring at a Malaysian couple who were eating at the table next to him. The next thing Mick
This is
Sargent
all
heard
bullshit.
was gunfire.
This is all bullshit.
The following series of events happened in the next 15 seconds.
And that's bullshit too.
The Malaysian couple were hit first. Mo Yi-ing was shot through the head. So instantaneous was his death that he was later found still clutching the knife with which he was eating. Su Leng Chung was shot through the head next. The third shot was aimed at Mick Sargent's head. It grazed his scalp. A fourth shot penetrated the head of his girlfriend, Kate Scott, killing her instantly. Next, Bryant aimed his AR-15 at Melbourne tourist Anthony Nightingale, who managed to shout, "No, no, not here!" before he was shot through the neck, killing him. His body slumped against the cafe window, alarming tourists standing outside, who had briefly thought that the gunfire was part of some sort of historical reenactment. Bryant then turned the gun on brothers Kevin and Ray Sharp and their friend Wally Bennett, who were visiting from Victoria. Wally was shot through the neck, and the bullet passed through him and also killed Ray. Kevin was then shot twice, including once in the head, killing him as well. All 3 men had been facing away from Bryant, and they did not know what was going on. 3 of their friends, also eating at the table, Gary Broom, John Fiddler, and his wife Gay, were hit by flying bullet fragments and severely wounded. At another table, Tony Kiston and his wife Sarah stood up in alarm. Tony quickly pushed Sarah out the nearby door. Before he could follow her, Tony was shot in the back of the head and killed. Beside Tony was Andrew Mills, who had moved from Sydney to Hobart to set up a bed and breakfast. He was shot through the head a split second later. 2 children's camp counselors, Thelma Walker and Pamela Law, were struck by the bullet fragments from these shots, and then their friend, Peter Crosswell, dragged them from their chairs to the floor to take cover. Another woman, Patricia Barker, was also hit with bullet fragments as she dove under the table. Bryant next turned his rifle on Graham Collier, his friend Carolyn Lawton, and Carolyn's teenage daughter, Sarah. They were just rising from the table to make their escape. Graham was shot through the jaw, but was not killed. Carolyn threw herself on top of her daughter to protect her, but Sarah had already been shot through the head and killed. Carolyn was shot in the back and survived after intensive surgery, but it wasn't until 24 hours later that she learned that her daughter was dead. Bryant then swiveled around and shot Victorian tourist Mervyn Howard through the head. The bullet continued and pierced one of the cafe windows. Then Bryant shot his wife, Mary, in the throat. He leaned over an empty baby stroller and shot her in the head at point-blank range, killing her. At this point, Bryant moved through the cafe in the direction of the adjoining gift shop. Robert Elliott came out from under the table where he was hiding to make a dash for the door. Bryant shot him in the arm and the head. Elliott was badly injured, but was not killed. 17 shots, 15 seconds, 12 dead, 10 wounded. Entering the gift shop, Bryant immediately opened fire on the two young women behind the counter, 17-year-old Nicole Burgess and 26-year-old Elizabeth Howard. Both were killed. Meanwhile, Victorian tourist Dennis Lever pushed his wife, Coralie, and their friend, Vera Jerry, behind a clothing display before, a second later, he was killed by a single shot to the head. Next, Bryant killed Gwen Neander while she was trying to run to the exit.
Everyone.
Another 5 people had made it to the same exit, only to discover that the door would not open. Bryant did not open fire on them because he was momentarily distracted by movement from the cafe. Bryant walked over to the cafe entrance and fired on Jason Winter, who had stood up from his hiding place, hitting him in the chest and then in the head, killing him. Winter managed to utter the words, "No, no," before he died. Bullet fragments from these shots hit American tourist Dennis Olson, injuring his scalp, hand, chest, and blinding him in one eye. Bryant then fired impulsively at one of the tabletops.
That sounds like it might be a shotgun pellet. But caused that injury? Just... But apparently, no. And, oh, I put out the wrong... Put on the wrong thing. Sorry.
Part with his bare hands. Greg forced Martin to let the cat go, relatively unharmed. Another time, Bryant shot him in the arm and the head. Elliott was badly injured, but was not killed. 17 shots, 15 seconds. Bryant tried to shoot the unidentified Asian male tourist, but discovered his rifle was out of ammunition. He walked over to the gift shop counter, took out a fresh clip, and reloaded. He left the empty clip on the counter. Rather than kill the remaining 2 people by the exit, he walked back into the cafe, retrieved his camcorder, slung the sports bag over his shoulder, and walked calmly out of the building. 29 shots, 90 seconds, 20 dead, 12 wounded.
Now, that would take some doing. Pretty good high rate of bullets to fatalities. You'd have to be pretty adept at, weaponry control and accuracy. Do you think a 10-year-old could do that?
Bryant stood on the steps of the cafe, taking pot shots at people in the parking lot. Bus driver Royce Thompson was hit in the back, fell to the ground, and crawled under a bus for cover. He later died of his wounds. Cafe employee Bridget Cook was struck in the right leg, and the bullet lodged in her thigh. Winifred Applin was running for cover inside a bus when she was shot in the side and killed.
All right, now, just FYI, there were 200 people, witnesses in that cafe. Maybe I'll just put a poll up. I'll put a poll, all right? I want you to tell me how many of those 200 people identified Bryant. Okay, we'll do the poll now.
Her friend, Yvonne Lockley, had a bullet graze her cheek before she leapt onto that same bus. Next, Bryant shot Janet Quinn in the back. She fell to the ground, paralyzed. Another shot hit Doug Hitchinson in the arm, and he fell to the ground. Then Bryant walked over to his yellow Volvo. He swapped from his AR-15 to his SLR semi-automatic rifle. Then Bryant got in the car and sat in the driver's seat for a few seconds, perhaps thinking about what he would do next. Then he got out of the car and took some pot shots at some tourists on the other side of the parking lot. None of the shots hit anyone, and a few of the bullets embedded into the trees. Bryant walked over to where Janet Quinn lay on the ground. He shot her again in the back. Bryant climbed onto a bus, but Finding it empty, he fired out the window at another bus, killing South African tourist Elva Gaylard and hitting Adelaide tourist Gordon Francis in the shoulder as he tried to pull the bus door shut. Meanwhile, Neville Quinn, husband of Janet Quinn, had fled toward the waterfront. He now returned to search for his wife. He found her lying next to a bus, slowly dying. He knelt by her side and clasped her hand in his. Bryant opened fire on him. The bullets missed. Neville scrambled to get inside a nearby bus. Bryant followed him aboard. He found Neville Quinn hiding between the two seats. Bryant raised his SLR and said, "No one gets away from me." Realizing that Bryant was about to fire, Neville Quinn shrank down further between the seats. A split second later, the bullet tore his neck. Thinking Neville was dead, Bryant got off the bus. He walked back to his yellow Volvo. As he moved, he fired upon American tourist James Velasco, who was some distance away, filming the massacre with his video camera. The bullet missed. Bryant got into his car and pulled out of the parking lot. Despite being gravely injured, Neville Quinn managed to stagger off the bus, bleeding profusely from the neck. He returned to where his wife, Janet, lay on the ground. She died in his arms. 12 minutes, 24 dead, 16 wounded. A swarm of panicked tourists were running up Jetty Road toward the toll booth at the entrance to the historical site. Among them was 36-year-old Nanette Mikach, who was carrying her 3-year-old daughter, Madeline, and her 6-year-old daughter, Alana, was running beside her. As they approached the toll booth, Nanette said to Alana, "We're safe now, Pumpkin." Bryant's yellow Volvo came up behind them and stopped opposite of Nanette. Thinking that Bryant might be offering to drive them to safety, Nanette approached the vehicle. Bryant got out, wielding his SLR semi-automatic rifle. He placed a hand on Nanette's shoulder and told her to kneel. A cry went up amongst the crowd. "It's him!" And people scattered. Bryant killed Nanette and her 3-year-old daughter, Madeline. He fired 2 shots at 6-year-old Alana as she fled into the trees. They missed. So Bryant followed her, found her, and killed her. Bryant got back into his Volvo and pulled up to the toll booth at the entrance to Port Arthur Historic Site. His way was blocked by a burnished gold BMW driven by Jim Pollard, with passengers Mary Rose Nixon, Robert Salzman, and his wife Helene. Bryant got out of his Volvo without a weapon and approached the BMW. Not realizing the situation, Robert Salzman got out of the car and began yelling at Bryant for blocking the way. In response, Bryant returned to his Volvo, fetched his SLR, and shot Robert Salzman at point-blank range, killing him. Meanwhile, Jim Pollard had climbed out of the driver's side door and was also shot and killed moments later. Other drivers in the vicinity began to realize what was going on and put their cars into reverse. They sped away from the scene. Bryant dragged both Mary Rose Nixon and Helene Salzman from the BMW and executed them. Then he transferred the SLR, AR-15, a few boxes of ammunition, 2 pairs of handcuffs, and a can of gasoline to the BMW. He left behind in his yellow Volvo the bolt-action hunting rifle, the 12-gauge shotgun, more cans of gasoline, and the kindling.
And his passport.
He also forgot the
Did you
keys
carry that?
to Seascape Guest House in the glove box. Before climbing into the BMW, Bryant fired 1 shot at a car driven by Graham Sutherland, which also contained his wife and 2 sons. The bullet smashed into the windscreen, but did not manage to injure anyone inside. Then Bryant got into the BMW and left the scene. 15 minutes, 31 dead, 16 wounded. The BMW pulled into the main street of Port Arthur, comprising of a few specialty shops, a gas station, and a general store. Some of the cars that had fled the toll booth area had pulled into the main street. One woman leapt out of her vehicle, ran into the gas station, and told the owner, Jim Laycock, to call the police. Laycock picked up the phone. As he did so, he saw a burnished gold BMW pull up to the gas station, blocking in a white Corolla driven by Glenn Pears with his girlfriend Zoe Hall in the passenger seat. In what Jim Laycock later described as the most frightening 2 minutes of my life, he watched as Bryant exited the BMW, carrying the AR-15, walked over to the passenger side of the Corolla, and tried to drag Zoe Hall out of the vehicle. Glenn Pears got out of the driver's side and was on his feet, ready to come to Zoe's aid. Bryant let Zoe go and aimed his rifle at Glenn. Bryant marched him at gunpoint to the BMW and forced the man into the trunk, slamming it shut. Meanwhile, Zoe Hall clambered into the driver's seat in the Corolla in an attempt to escape, but Bryant let off 3 shots through the windshield, killing her instantly. Then Bryant got into the BMW and drove away. He headed down the Arthur Highway in the direction of Seascape Guest House. Along the way, he opened fire out of the window at a passing Ford Falcon, shattering its windshield. A few minutes later, Bryant pulled into the gravel driveway at Seascape. He got out of the BMW with his rifle and stood by the road, shooting at passing vehicles. John Rook was driving a Datsun sedan, dragging a trailer. Bryant's bullets went wide and missed. Behind him was Linda White and her boyfriend Michael Wanders in a Holden 4x4. Bryant peppered the SUV with bullets, one of which struck Linda White in the arm, damn near severing it from her body. Then Bryant fired on a sedan driven by Doug Horn. The bullet shattered the windscreen, sending shards of glass into Horn's arms and chest. Broken glass showered the 3 other occupants in the vehicle. Additional bullets thankfully missed. Ann Wardle, following in another vehicle, saw the shots and threw her car into reverse. Bryant opened fire, hitting her side door. Meanwhile, a red sedan came up behind Ann, driven by Simon Williams and his wife, Susan, in the passenger seat. Simon swerved into the other lane and sped up to drive past the gunman. Bryant fired twice at the sedan, with one of the bullets piercing the passenger window and shattering Susan Williams's left hand, while her husband got sprayed with shrapnel. Ann Wardle, meanwhile, had managed to reverse down the highway, heading away from Port Arthur, out of sight of Bryant's gun. Ann Wardle leapt out of her vehicle and began flagging down oncoming cars, telling them to stop. A madman was on the loose. Bryant got back into the BMW and guided it up the gravel drive to the cottage entrance. He exited the vehicle, opened the trunk, and forced Glenn Pears out with the AR-15 pointing in his face. Bryant cuffed Glenn's hands behind his back. Then Bryant marched him toward the cottage door. Realizing that he had left the keys to Seascape in his Volvo, Bryant either kicked the door open or threw his body weight against it. He pushed Glenn Pears into the cottage and used the second pair of handcuffs to secure Pears to the thick stair rail. Bryant went back outside, retrieved his SLR and boxes of ammunition, and brought them inside. Then Bryant doused the BMW with a can of gasoline and set the car ablaze. He returned to the guest house, shut the door, and barricaded it. It had been approximately 30 minutes since Bryant had first unzipped his big bag of guns at the cafe. 32 dead, 23 wounded, 1 taken hostage. Add to that the bodies of David and Noeline Martin, already lying on a bed in Seascape Guest House after being brutally murdered earlier that day, and the death toll rises to 34. Siege. Police constables Paul Hyland and Gary Whittle arrived at Seascape Guest House just after 2 p.m. to find a BMW on fire in the driveway. No sooner did the officers exit their vehicle than Martin Bryant opened fire on them from Seascape's front window. The 2 constables retreated to a muddy ditch at the end of the driveway and crouched down as bullets whizzed all around them. The local cops were horrendously ill-equipped, only pistols against Bryant's 2 semi-automatic rifles. Bryant continued to pepper the top of the ditch with bullets while the officers radioed for help. Over the next 2 hours, over 500 officers, roughly half of Tasmania's police force, were deployed in a wide perimeter around the country cottage. The Melbourne Special Operations Group, the Aussie equivalent of SWAT, and additional police reinforcements were flown in from the mainland. A command post was set up in the nearby town of Tirana. Because of the range of Bryant's guns, the police did not assemble too close to Seascape. Constables Whittle and Hyland wound up spending 8 hours in the ditch in front of the house until they could be extracted under cover of darkness. Meanwhile, police negotiator Terry McCarthy, police psychologist Mike Ryan, and forensic psychologist Dr. Ian Sale phoned Seascape to talk to Bryant and figure out what they were dealing with here. The first call to Seascape went through at 4:30 p.m. Bryant answered the phone, said his name was Jamie, and lied that he had 3 hostages instead of just Glenn Pears. He did not divulge that the Martins were already dead. Bryant pretended to be taking food and water to the 3 hostages.
Pretended. Really. When we get to it, we will be playing these audio tapes of the hostage negotiator, and you can actually hear gunshots in the background whilst he's on the phone saying that he's going to take a cup of tea to the I would tease the hostages. And he's calling himself Jamie. Why would you do that unless you're playing a game, maybe? Who knows?
He spoke to McCarthy on the phone. Bryant demanded a helicopter to fly him and Noeline Martin to Hobart, where he intended to board a flight to Adelaide. Of course, Noeline was
crazy
already
picture.
dead,
Got to
and
enforce
Bryant
that.
had no serious
Crazy
plan
picture.
or intention to leave Seascape alive. McCarthy said that it might be difficult to procure a helicopter. Bryant responded by saying, "You can buy a helicopter. I've got the money. You don't understand. I've got the money." Then he related
I
a
like the
long,
voice of the
rambling
tone.
story about how he had once tried to buy a helicopter for $95,000, or roughly.
So I found this guy, and I was going to watch it just purely to see, what he knew and what, just get different perspectives and stuff, because that's what I do. And it pretty much showed me that it was the epitome of the mainstream media's narrative on what they wanted projected with regards to Martin. And so I thought I would use it as like a reaction video to show you how that has evolved and how that is perpetuated, because this is only like a couple of years old. So it continues to be perpetuated to this day. The bullshit. And yes, it's like a porn stash. Big 70s porn stash.
$200,000 a day when he saw one advertised in a Hobart newspaper. McCarthy asked Bryant how he was feeling. Bryant said, "Relaxed. It's just like being on a Hawaiian holiday." McCarthy asked why. Bryant answered, "I don't myself rightly know." McCarthy made 5 more telephone calls to Seascape Guest House between 5 and 9:30 p.m.
Now, Seascape is just an enigma to me, because it absolutely makes no sense whatsoever. And I really, really, really want to delve as deep as I can into that. I'm actually waiting for Andrew McGregor to contact me, to get back to me, because he is he's a retired Victorian police officer who probably knows more. Like he got called to go down there. So he's a first-hand witness and good source of evidence, basically. So, yeah. Andrew. Paul, if you're watching, tell Andrew to call me.
During the course of their conversation, Bryant told McCarthy he thought that Noeline Martin was bad news, and she prevented his father from purchasing a property in the area. When McCarthy brought up the shooting at Port Arthur, Bryant asked him with childlike interest, how many people were hurt?
See? This is his question. He's in the police interview. Let me go back. Listen to the wording.
Telephone calls to Seascape Guest House between 5 and 9:30 p.m. During the course of their conversation, Bryant told McCarthy he thought that Noeline Martin was bad news, and she had prevented his father from purchasing a property in the area.
Oh, really?
When McCarthy brought up the shooting at Port Arthur, Bryant asked him with childlike interest, how many people were hurt? McCarthy did not give a direct answer. At the time, he did not know the total dead and wounded, even if he had wanted to satisfy Bryant's morbid
no
curiosity.
idea why I was there.
Bryant also threatened to kill his 3 hostages
crazy
if police
photo.
came up the drive or tried to storm.
That's certainly getting its money's worth, isn't it? I'm going to find a bad pause from this guy and start posting that.
Storm the place. For their part, the cops had no way of knowing whether the 3 people were still alive. They would not risk trying to force the issue unless it became clear Bryant was murdering people inside the house. McCarthy's final call to Seascape was at 9:30 p.m., shortly after which the line went dead. It turned out Bryant was using a cordless phone and had merely neglected to charge the battery. Meanwhile, Bryant sporadically fired
he was
shots.
well organised for a siege then, wasn't he? Takes planning. Forgot to charge the main communication for demands. Holy crap. What are the odds?
Out of the cottage windows. He had a fairly wide view of the surrounding area. Not too many trees blocking his vantage, and fairly wide open gardens.
Wide open.
A cloudless, moonlit sky.
And I'll just have you note too, the entire siege, not one person was injured or harmed. In fact, when someone was noted, like one of the special ops guys was trying to make advances. Martin calls the hostage negotiator and says, tell him to come back. So why would he do that when he could have clearly taken a pot shot at him and killed him? Because, I mean, what's one more after 35, really? Like, yes, he was in there. Yes, absolutely. He was there. And they arrested him the next morning because they set fire to the cottage, and he came out, like, funnily enough, don't ask me, like, if you're going to set a cottage on fire and you're dousing it, the accelerant would splash on you where? Would it splash on you on your front or your back? Because he came out with his back on fire. That I have to find out. Like, there is, the story that they showed you, or they told you at the poll booth, sorry, where the two cars were there, both the Volvo and the gold BMW. Now, one of the witnesses, which I will get to because I have to break it up into sections because it's so in depth, but one of the people that worked at Port Arthur at the toll booth has an interview with Paul Motor from the Wasp Files, and he actually lost his wife. She was one of the ones serving in the cafe, and he interviews him as a two-part interview on the Wasp Files, and he even says it wasn't Martin, but he says that both of the vehicles were there at the toll booth at the same time, and the gold BMW was parked in front of the Volvo, and he said the Volvo had 4 occupants in it. The shooter was in the driver's position, and the people in the car weren't scared or petrified or anything like that, but they each got out and ended up having an argument of some sort, and they all wound up dead. But the guy that the toll booth operator, like from that area, they said it wasn't Martin, and I've got a feeling that perhaps Martin was at Seascape the entire time. Well, my theory is that someone named Jamie has befriended him, basically because he's an easy target to get hold of his money. Let's play a game. You can be me today and I'll be you. So that explains if he dons some, blonde wig and impersonates him and drives his car, and uses his gun and just so happily travels with his passport. And I don't believe Martin left that cottage. He stayed there pretending to be this Jamie, like it was a role play. And that would explain, when the other guy gets back to the cottage, that you can hear the gunshots in the background while Martin's on the phone. And I haven't gone to it's yes, the story goes that on his way from Port Arthur to the cottages after the massacre, that he stops to buy petrol, and that's when he takes the hostage and kills the wife, the girlfriend. He actually did that on the way there too, allegedly. So, but yeah, the gold BMW was what was used to get from the cafe up to the toll booth. Like, it's the only bit of footage, and it's grainy, and it's like the back of him. The only bit of footage of the shooter is that trip from the cafe to the BMW, and he's got a big long black coat on of some sort, and that you don't see the face. So, but yeah, the gold BMW was what was used to get from the cafe up to the toll booth. Like, it's the only bit of footage of the shooter is that trip from the cafe to the BMW, and he's got a big long black coat on of some sort, and yeah, and apparently when they arrived at Seascape Cottages, there was somewhere I read it, I can't remember where, but I will get to it when we get to that point in the story. But yeah, Martin was wearing a completely different set of clothes. But my point was that if you're going to set if you're going to set this place on fire, you don't douse yourself on the back with the accelerant. That doesn't make sense. And there's also the way the guns were found. Now, one of them was found on a roof of one of the cottages, a fair distance away. But both of them had been damaged to the extent where they could never be ballistically tested again either. So it was the AR-15. There was actually like an explosive device put into the barrel or whatever it is, wherever you put it, and exploded so that it completely wrecked the inside so that it could never be traced. Now, a 10-year-old's not going to think of that. That's not something that he would even like. Well, I wouldn't have even considered that. It's just bizarre. It's really, really bizarre because there's so many anomalies. Like, witnesses saying that they're treating, the first responders down there are saying that they're treating shotgun wounds, and yet they say that there's a shotgun in the bag, but they say it wasn't used, and there's nothing in the autopsies, and there's nothing in the injuries. It's like, and you've got witness statements saying this. It's just, again, more questions than answers, basically. Let's test it. So you got it. You can test it on my mother-in-law, my stepmother, step monster. No. I'll nominate her.
To detect movement in the shadows.
Why?
Police gave the cottage a wide berth because of the gunfire. The only vital operation was extracting the 2 trapped police officers at 10 p.m. When the team moved in...
That's what I was going to, yeah. So he's surrounded by special ops, and yet not one person dies. And also, there is there was a helicopter and someone else in the special ops, and they had 2 opportunities, and it's recorded, and it comes across on the radio. We have the lone gunman on the roof, we have sites, we have engaged, requesting permission to fire, and at both times they were told no. Both times, no, do not engage. Clear shot on the roof, no hostages, no one around him on the roof, and they said no, this needs to play out. Now, the first responder, it's her name is Wendy Skur, and I've got her interview. She's actually dead now, unfortunately, but she was the one that went around Australia basically with Andrew McGregor, telling the truth of the Port Arthur Massacre, because they were there, and she was an employee of Port Arthur, who had just been taken over the year before by some business company, but she was employed in like the first aid officer. Basically, she was the one training everyone to do CPR and all that stuff, and she did work for St John's Ambulance as well, so she would train people in the community. And she was also a tour guide, which was what she was performing that day. And she walked in and saw the gunman sitting on the front porch of the cafe, and they pretty much nodded at each other. She went inside and decided that she was going to go out the back way because there was too many people in there. And the second that she did that, that's when the firing started. So she was very, very lucky that she, within that 10-second gap was, didn't stop and linger. So she basically was on scene and started triaging immediately as soon as he left the cafe. And she flat out adamantly says it's not Martin, because Martin and Wendy were not Martin and Helen were well known because they used to frequent that cafe and have afternoon teas quite regularly. So he was known. Oh, there is more questions than answers. Absolutely more questions. It's the biggest. That's why it's taken me so long to put together, because there is so much to try and analyze and understand. And you've got to sift through the bullshit as well. So basically what I'm going off is like, and it's even hard to do that because, court records and stuff. And most of it's redacted, like the actual hearing where he's pleading guilty. The transcript starts at page 50. Like, it's so heavily redacted, and the rest of it is sealed. It's under seal. So I read that the valet guy talked to Martin right before it happened, and he had the gun. The valet guy, I don't know who that is. The gun bag is a question, like, because the girlfriend there, Petra Wilmot, claims that bag was purchased like the week before at Maya, and that there were all these special requests that he had to, like, it had to be a certain length and size and all this stuff. But I don't know. I don't know who to believe, and given that there's so much bullshit flying around, who knows? But what would a retired police officer have to gain? What would a victim, like Wendy, actually got she got harassed so badly by the community because she actually came out and said that she saw the shooter and it wasn't Martin. She was absolutely harassed by the community, and so were the nursing staff and the doctors at the hospital that treated Martin after he came out of Seascape. So there was a lot of community pressure on the police to try and get a conviction. So, put two and two together. I don't know. He was just, and then, like, okay, well, let's put numbnuts. Let's nominate numbnuts because he's he doesn't know left from right or right from wrong. So let's just, easy. Then once he was incarcerated, he was isolated completely for 3 years. Carleen, his mum, couldn't visit at all. He had no visitors. He had no mail. I've got letters that show from the prison and from Carleen that she's requesting to see him, and they're saying no, he doesn't want to see you. He doesn't want to read your letters. And in the 30 years that he has been incarcerated, she has been the only person that's been allowed to actually visit him at Rysden Prison. Every media interview has been denied. Every other interview has been denied or request to visit him. So the only way that I can see because like there's so many of his rights that were not upheld, so many, his own defense attorney coerced him into it. And he admits it on a video. Right to trial. There was no attempt made for a trial. They didn't want a trial. They didn't want anything. They wanted him to plead because IQ of 66, probably not fit to stand trial. If they went to trial, then all of the evidence would have had to have been exposed for the public to see. This way they could keep it under wraps and seal it. They basically just jailed the village idiot. So, yes, I'm trying to answer all these questions. And I'm happy to share the Dropbox and everything with you if you want it, so you can make your own minds up. And I encourage you to go and watch the WASP files as well. And yeah, do your own research, because you don't dig, you don't find, you don't know.
They kept their movements slow.
I should have said that to Proctor. Actually, I saw a quote up there. I missed it. Where is it? So many questions. How did she know the person she saw was the shooter? Yeah, he had the bag, the camcorder. I can't remember exactly what she said, but I will be playing the interview. So, yes. If I'm still up, yeah, it's only 3:30 in the afternoon. I'm busting for a wee, so I'll keep playing this and I'll go for a twinkle.
Right, and close to the ground. The constables were rescued without the team being detected.
But remember, just watch it with a grain of salt, okay? Whilst I'm here and I haven't got my buzzer.
Over the course of the night, Bryant fired 250 rounds in random directions. Bryant's guns went silent between 4 a.m. and 6 a.m., while he presumably slept. Police still did not storm the house because they had no way of knowing for certain if Bryant was asleep or if the house was booby-trapped. And even if he was asleep, there was no guarantee that Bryant wouldn't have time to wake up and kill a hostage before he was cut down or apprehended. At 6 a.m., April 29th, 1996, the sporadic gunfire resumed. Bryant was obviously awake. Police settled in for the second day of the siege. Amidst the renewed gunfire out the windows, one of the shots may have gone off inside. At some point that morning, it is thought, Martin Bryant shot and killed his hostage, Glenn Pears. It is also possible that Pears was murdered at some point during the night. At 7:45 a.m., police noticed that smoke was billowing from the second floor of Seascape Guest House. 10 minutes later, the fire spread to the ground floor. Bryant's ammunition started exploding in the heat. The fire might have spurred police to move in, but the combusting ammo sounded like gunfire, making it too risky to advance. It is likely that Bryant intended to die inside Seascape Guest House, but the pain of burning to death proved too much. Instinct kicked in. At 8:15 a.m., Martin Bryant suddenly burst out of the front door, his clothes engulfed in flames. Bryant ran around the back of the house. He stripped off his burning clothes and reappeared at the front of the cottage, completely naked. He dropped to his knees on the lawn. Police moved in and cuffed his hands and legs. Then they carried him to a waiting ambulance. He was taken to Royal Hobart Hospital and treated under heavy guard. He had sustained second and third-degree burns to his legs, back, and buttocks. Meanwhile, Seascape Cottage continued to crackle and crumble. Firefighters were brought in. The inferno was eventually tamed. Investigators quickly found the charred remains of Glenn Pears, cuffed to a railing, and David and Noeline Martin lying together in one of the bedrooms. 35 dead, 23 wounded. Among the fatalities were 2 children. A giggling psychopath. In the months following his arrest, Martin Bryant's low intelligence, childlike naivety, and utter psychopathy were on full display. Despite the overwhelming evidence against him, Bryant denied being the gunman who carried out the Port Arthur Massacre. The only thing he would admit to was the kidnap of Glenn Pears. The severity of the situation did not seem to dawn on him. Bryant thought that by denying the murders, he could wriggle out of things with a mild slap on the wrist, and he tackled police questioning as if he were a child who had landed in trouble at school. Of course, the cops had dozens of eyewitnesses, video footage, fingerprints, ballistics evidence identifying his guns, recovered fairly intact from Seascape as the murder weapons, and his Volvo was left at the scene. Never mind that the 4 passengers inside the BMW he had stolen were found dead at the entrance to the Port Arthur historic site. Yet Bryant falsely believed he was in the position and had the cognitive ability to play cat and mouse with the cops over the day's events. On the 4th of July, 1996, Bryant was brought into an interview room, his legs manacled and his arms cuffed to a wheelchair. He was subjected to an extensive interrogation that lasted several hours. Again, Bryant proved himself uncooperative. He just sat there, smiling and giggling, expressing patently false sympathy for the victims and issuing the occasional flimsy denial. He seemed to be enjoying the attention, and given that Bryant used to pay thousands of dollars to fly across the world just so he could talk to the plane passengers unlucky enough to be seated next to him, there did not seem to be a very high bar for the quality of the conversation. He did not seem to mind that the officers present were generally disgusted by him, occasionally frustrated and angry, and that they were accusing him of multiple murders. One of the detectives present asked, "Do you remember the 28th of April this year?" Bryant replied, "I don't. Was that the day I suppose everyone's talking about?" Police asked Bryant what he did after leaving 30 Clare Street that morning. Bryant replied, "I went surfing. I went surfing that day." The cops asked if he made any stops on the Port Arthur Highway. Bryant admitted to stopping to get a coffee. He did not mention the other stops, and outright denied stopping in the town of Sorel to buy a bottle of ketchup. He laughed and shook his head. "What would I need a bottle of tomato sauce for?" To this day, we still don't know why the hell Bryant bought it, but there may not be a rational explanation. We aren't dealing with the most rational mind here. It is important to note that during his recovery in hospital and subsequent time spent in a jail cell, authorities tried to deprive Bryant of any information or media coverage about the massacre. At one point, during the interview, Bryant asked, "How many people died altogether there?" One of the detectives replied, "Including the people at Seascape, 35. At that point, Bryant's mouth dropped open, and he did a double take. He seemed pleased that the number was so high. He followed up with, "And how many people injured? Many?" "Quite a lot," came the answer. But that wasn't sufficient for Bryant. "How many is quite a lot?" "Approximately 20. Bryant's mouth dropped open again. He leaned forward and grinned, as if he could not believe his luck. He asked, "What, seriously or not?" Then he laughed. No remorse, barely recognizing that these were people. From Bryant's perspective, he had wanted to make an impact, to terrify society, and be seen as a villain. So all he heard was a high number, like it was a high score in a video game. The detective got irritated. "I've told you what you've done." Bryant looked back at him insolently. "What have I done?" The other detective interjected, "You killed 35 people." Bryant merely smiled, shook his head, and looked away. Two more detectives were brought into the room. They continued to press him on the murders. Bryant continued to sit there, giggling. The detective said, "It's not funny, Martin. Why are you laughing?" Bryant shrugged. "I can't explain any of this. I don't know anything about the killings." "But it's not funny, is it?" "What isn't?" Bryant asked childishly. "What I told you about. So why are you laughing?" "Because it's good to get out of my cell," Bryant said, and he started laughing again. The cops brought forward an AR-15, the same model of gun used during the massacre. Bryant admitted to buying one under the table from a vendor named Terry Hill. Bryant answered a classified ad in the Hobart Mercury. He had bought the gun at a steep 500% markup and paid in cash. No record of the transaction. No need for Bryant to have a firearms license. Bryant added, "I wish I had that AR-15 in here. Then I'd probably be able to get out. Jump out the window and escape. Because I don't like being locked up." Bryant denied being the owner of the big blue sports bag found in the yellow Volvo left at the scene, containing boxes of ammunition and the 12-gauge shotgun. Despite witness testimony from the store clerk and his girlfriend seeing him buy such a bag, despite witnesses seeing him with it in the cafe, despite his fingerprints being on the bag, the ammo, and the shotgun, and all over the Volvo, Martin Bryant denied everything. The only crime Bryant would admit to was the kidnapping of Glenn Pears, but not his murder, nor the murder of his girlfriend. It required quite a few distortions and leaps of logic. Bryant claimed that Pears was driving the BMW that Bryant later torched outside Seascape. Of course, Bryant had stolen the BMW driven by Jim Pollard from the entrance to Port Arthur, killing all of its 4 occupants. Pears had been driving a Corolla. Bryant made no mention of Pears' girlfriend, Zoe Hall, whom he had murdered at the service station in full view of witnesses. As to why, in Bryant's version of events, he stole the BMW, he merely said, "I saw this car, right? And I liked it." Regarding Glenn Pears, a detective asked, "How did this guy get to be in the boot?" "Oh, I put him there. I had this gun, see? The AR-15. I pointed it in his face." Bryant provided no explanation as to why he just randomly decided to steal a car and take someone hostage that day. After a moment's thought, he added, "See, if people didn't do these unfortunate things, you guys wouldn't have a job." Then he laughed. The detective replied, "Well, there's a lot of truth in that, mate, let me tell you." Bryant was shown a file folder full of images from the crime scenes at Port Arthur, including photographs of each of the 35 dead. Bryant's reaction was to pore over them, fascinated, gleeful, reveling in it. He started laughing. There was not a trace of regret. Frustrated, the detective slammed the folder shut and walked back to his seat. Bryant was asked, "What would you think about a person who has killed 35 people? What would be your opinion of that person?" Bryant looked at the detective insolently, rolling his eyes and looking at the ceiling. Then he said, "It's a wicked, awful, horrendous thing. Something like that. I don't know. And they reckoned others were injured?" he asked, obviously relishing the moment. "Many injured. There's been 2 little babies shot. There have been many witnesses who have given very graphic description of you being responsible for killing those people." Bryant looked at the detective with a mixture of boredom and contempt while he repeatedly nodded his head. Then he replied, his voice full of mockery. "It's sad, isn't it? Horrendous. Beggars belief. Horrific. For anyone to go down there and do a thing like that." It boggles the mind that Bryant thought that these repeated denials were even worth the energy, along with statements of shock that were absolutely brimming with sarcasm. Perhaps Bryant was just acting petulantly after being backed into a corner. But there are indications.
All right, what did I miss? You didn't vote in today's poll. All right, well, I'll tell you. Out of the 200 people, I'm going to close the vote. Voting now. End of poll. What were the results? Okay. Correct. 2 people out of 100 ID'd him as the shooter. 2. So there you go. What is he on about at the moment? Is he going through the police interviews? Should get out. Of course, I should get out. I should get out on bail tomorrow. What? Let me go back a little bit.
Horrendous. Beggars belief. Horrific.
I like the voice.
For anyone to go down there and do a thing like that. It boggles the mind that Bryant thought that these repeated denials were even worth the energy, along with statements.
I've never heard of a valet guy.
Absolutely.
I've no, nothing that I have found has mentioned anything about a valet guy. Because the valet, the toll booth is like up the top of the hill. It's not down the bottom, near the cafe at all. You wouldn't be able to see one from the other. So the only person that I know is at the toll booth. That was one of the witnesses that was interviewed, and he was the one that lost his wife. So I don't know any valet at all. And valet suggests parking. There was buses, but I'm not aware of any valet ever. And I've been there. There wasn't any valet parking. I was there 2 years before, so I don't know. First I've heard of that, but I will actually make note to have a look. And I think we'll leave it here because this is getting into like the police interviews and what have you, and we're going to deal with that in another episode. But I'm not coming at this from trying to determine. Oh, let me just get rid of all this shit off the screen so that you can see what I'm talking about. Where is let's go back to this one. All right. I'm not coming at this from a like a guilt or innocence perspective. I'm coming at it as were his rights upheld through the process for, justice, basically. And I cannot say that they were at all, at any time, at any point in the so-called investigation. He was supposed to be on the disability support pension with an intellectual disability. He should have been appointed a guardian, and the guardian and the attorney should have been present at all times during the questioning. And as you saw in that police video, there was no one. And yeah, just effective service of counsel. Your defence attorney coerces you into a guilty plea, and by telling his mother to tell him that she would never see him again if he didn't plead guilty. Yeah, so well, you can think he did it, but you got to show me. You got to prove it. Bring the receipts, because there is absolutely nothing that indicates at all that he did it at all. Even into the point where they pick up the AR-15. Now, the witnesses in the cafe say that the shooter had the AR-15 at hip level and was shooting from hip level on the right-hand side, sort of just twisting backwards and forwards, because that made sense. The people were sitting in the cafe, so that would make the shots all head height, which was the majority of the injuries. The injury met the witnesses' statements. So they hand that, you see it on the video, they hand Martin the AR-15, and he immediately puts it up to his left shoulder because he's left-handed. And where the cartridges are discharged from the barrel is at the base of the barrel on the right-hand side. And that would have blown straight into his face. So there would have been at least, a couple of, like the fireworks, a couple of tiny burns on his face from the gunshot. But then he's rapid firing as well. So, because it's semi-automatic. Just shit like that. And then I will play you the video, the tape of the audio from the hostage negotiator. And you can clearly hear him on the phone chatting away, happy as Larry, and there's gunshots going off in the background. Who's firing it? Because it ain't him. And then why would the special ops have a visual on him on the roof and be denied the shot? Like, and where's the money? Where's the money? Yeah. So anyway, so thank you again for joining me. We will be back with episode 3. I can't decide whether I'm going to do Helen Harvey and find the money or the deep dive on the psychiatrist, but yeah, we'll work that out. Have a look for the thumbnail, click that like and subscribe, and I'll see you when I'm looking at you. Hasta la vista, bitches.
Hey there, thanks for stopping in. We hope you will join us again. We all look forward to next time. We get to talk about true crime. Clues. Justice served in an honest fight. True crime tales till the verdict's right. Solving more than just trivial quests, with sentences rule and the defense rests. Our true crime family is great. All types of topics we debate. Smash that like and ring that bell. Hit subscribe, you might as well.